and I'm out here trying to represent them, trying to spread this message that yes, you can do those things, and if you do them well enough, you can one day put on this jersey too.
That is Cody Kirchner. He's trying out for the new USA Blind Soccer National Team. We also heard from goalkeeper Brant Heron and Katie Smith, the head coach. Mike Damron of KPBS produced this story. If you want to see video of the tryouts, it's at our website, hereandnow.org.
And we have some sad news to report. Noodle, the geriatric pug who captured the heart of millions of people on social media, has died. His owner, Jonathan Graciano, says Noodle passed away in his arms on Friday. The little dog charmed the world with a tongue that stuck out of his mouth and became famous for declaring whether the day was a bones or a no-bones day. On some mornings, Graciano would prop Noodle up in his dog bed. If Noodle stood, it would officially be a day to take on the world, a bones day. But if Noodle collapsed back into bed...
Noodle. Oh, sure enough. Okay, it's a no bones day. No bones day, but that's not a bad thing. Today we reclaim the no bones day as a day for kindness and self-care and just listening to what you need.
And millions of fans followed Noodle's lead. The viral TikTok account led to a picture book called Noodle and the No Bones Day and appearances on national TV. Noodle's declarations carved out a safe space on the internet at a time of great uncertainty. People came together as they watched him roam about his New York City neighborhood, eat snacks, and settle down on the sofa at the end of a day on a spot called the Comfy Mountain. Last year, we spoke with Graciano about his dog's legacy.
In 10 years, when there is a retrospect, you know, when we do the Noodle, the No Bones retrospective, and we learn all about the actual, like, socioeconomic impact of this, I think it all just boils down to joy is elusive on the internet, and a lot of news sharing is very negative, and this is just like a fun, happy thing that I'm so grateful to know that people have latched onto.
Over the weekend, Graciano thanked his followers for loving the 14-year-old.
The 2 p.m. session of Roanoke City Council for Monday, December the 5th is hereby called to order. I'll ask our clerk, Miss Susie McCord, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor White Boyd. Here. Mr. Bestfitch. Mr. Cobb. Here. Ms. Moon Reynolds.
Here.
Ms. Price.
Here.
Ms. Sanchez Jones.
Here.
And Mayor Lee.
Here, and a quorum is present. I'm going to ask Councilman Joseph Cobb to lead us in our invocation today, and I will follow him in leading you with the Pledge of Allegiance. Would you please stand?
Loving God, there is a light within each of us. Sometimes that light is diminished by the challenges that we face. Sometimes those are brought about because of our circumstances. Sometimes they're brought about because we are facing challenges in our lives that seemed unimaginable. Sometimes the weight of those challenges seems overwhelming. And sometimes we find ourselves grieving the loss of a loved one, the loss of a dear pet, the loss of an opportunity we thought we had before us. As we go through our meeting today, we'll hear lots of stories and experiences from different people in our community, working hard to keep that light on in so many different ways and for so many different people. May we always remember that we have a light within us, and may we help one another keep that light strong. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman Carr, for the invocation. And welcome everybody to our second session of today. We've had a very crowded day, meetings today, but we've been able to get it all done. So welcome. Let me first of all say council meetings will be televised live and replayed on RVTV Channel 3 on Thursdays at 7 o'clock p.m. and Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 5 o'clock p.m. So Saturday, you can watch it from 10 to 5 all day. You can go back and look at it. That's something you missed. You can go back. And video stream through Facebook Live at facebook.com/Roanoke VA. And council meetings are offered with closed captioning for the deaf or hard of hearing. All right, as we go down the agenda, item number 2 is presentations and acknowledgments, and we have none today that I'm aware of. And then we have a hearing of citizens. Item number 3 is the hearing of citizens upon public matters, and City Council sets this time aside, as a priority for citizens to be heard. All matters will be referred to the city manager for a response, a recommendation, or a report to council as he may deem appropriate. And I will ask our clerk, do we have anybody to sign up to speak to us this afternoon?
Yes, we have several.
All right, we'll just call them in the order that you received.
Okay. The first person will be Ronnie Sutton.
Good afternoon.
So I prepared this. I'm Ronnie Sutton. I'm the president of Blue Brick Building and Renovations, which is a Class A contracting company. I've worked extensively in Roanoke, and in fact, our company won an award for a house that we renovated on Roar Avenue several years ago. I'm here today to speak to you about the historic house in Fishburne Park. I have been in the building several times and noted the measurements and renovation needs. The building is similar in scope and size to a house that we just finished in Blue Ridge last year. Our house had significant foundation, sill, and joist issues. We had to replace 2 sides of the foundation, and we removed and replaced 2 floors in 2 rooms. We were able to complete the entire project, all of it, roof, mechanical systems, floors, everything, for under $100,000. In my professional opinion, particularly if we use volunteer labor, for much of the work, we could renovate the structure in Fishburne Park for far less than $100,000. In fact, several years ago, I attempted to purchase the building, and my proposal was denied because it went against the City Council-approved neighborhood plan. We wanted to put an ice cream shop in it. 2 years ago, I agreed to volunteer my time and license to pull the permits and oversee the project by organizing volunteers and subcontractors with Frida Cathcart. I am still willing to do this today. In addition to my professional expertise, I'm also the president of the Bedford Historic Society, as well as the president of the Montville School Preservation Foundation, which is a group working with the County of Bedford to save and renovate the historic Montville School. In that capacity, I have experience with liability waivers, commercial renovation, and experience working with local government board of supervisors. I hope that you will consider working with us to restore the building for the community or other use rather than selling it. However, if you feel that it must be sold, I hope you will open it to others to bid in a transparent and competitive way under its current zoning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Frida Cathcart.
I don't know how many speakers are, but I would hope I would get 5 minutes if it's possible. And I don't know if you received, I sent an email that had a PowerPoint presentation. Is that available to
No,
queue
I
up?
don't have the PowerPoint.
Okay. All right. Well, hold on. Let me get my notes then. I thought I'd be working off of that.
How many minutes, Madam Clerk? How many minutes does she have? How many speakers? Depending on the number of speakers.
We have 3 more speakers, so that would be 5 speakers,
Okay. So 3 minutes each.
3 minutes.
Okay.
3 minutes.
I'll send a follow-up email and try and go through this fast. Thank you for this opportunity. I know most of you are familiar with me, but you might not be familiar with me as a FLMI. That is a financial and insurance professional designation. I also am a developer and investor. Back around 1990, I went to my first Roanoke Co-op meeting. It was an emergency meeting that had been called because half of the board of directors had resigned from the Roanoke Co-op, and they were $300,000 in debt, and they called an emergency meeting of the members to discuss what would happen next. I left that meeting as the communications liaison of the Roanoke Co-op, and within the year, I became the president. I steered the Roanoke Co-op through that crisis situation to the successful business that it is. Back in those days, they had a little place across the street from where it is now, no parking. Our vision at that time and what we were working for was to get them in the position that we are now, which is across the street with parking, and then there's even a little offshoot down here in downtown. I'm also a Left Bank land founder and developer. It's a micro-village that we built up in Floyd County. With that project, I helped design the corporate structure of that. We built a road, 2 ponds, our water system for $17,000 that was financed over 5 years. A lot of that was because of sweat equity of us all collaborating and working together. We paid off that loan within 5 years, paying $15 a month. Now our payments have gone up to $17 a month, which covers unlimited supply of water that comes to our cabin, to our properties, as well as paying our insurance and our taxes. I think it was around 2014, 2015, I was on the board of my church, Unity of the Roanoke Valley. They had been for over 20 years wanting to expand the building, and I designed a presentation of financing and how we could go about doing it to the church that passed. We did a $750,000 building expansion, and it's been a big success. So I wanted to say that according to Women Give 2010, a higher percentage of women than men give to charity. Moreover, women in the lowest and middle give twice what men usually do. We are the ones that build community through collaboration, and we get things done. Ronnie Sutton and I can do what needs to be done to turn the house in Fishburne Park into something that is an amenity for our region, not just a neighborhood. Something that can benefit all and be something that our city is proud of. We can do it through grants and fundraising, sweat equity, and I'll send you a follow-up email that has a picture's worth 1,000 words. So anyhow, thank you for this time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Victor Banks.
Good afternoon.
Hey.
Good afternoon.
Distinguished members of council and honorary mayor. First, I'd like to thank you for the proclamation that was given to Melrose Athletic Club for 50 years serving the Roanoke community. And I see Mr. Bestpitch is not here, but I'd like to thank him in his absence for coming to Champs Gym to deliver it. And I am president of Melrose Athletic Club, which is the nonprofit that Champs Gym is a division of. And I've come today to speak on some concerns I have about what's going on at the old firehouse number 6 that we are renting from the city. We're currently in our second 3-year lease. And there's been a lot of misinformation going around concerning our program. So try to get this done. I'm not a great speaker, but I try to do my best. It's important that I be here. Well, over the past 6 years, we appreciate partnering with the Roanoke City, and I think we've touched the lives of a lot of the youth and young adults in the area, and all people that come all across the Roanoke Valley to come to our drug-free, character-based, holistic environment. And our motto is a fighting chance for our youth. We have many youth and young adults that have been training hard over the last year and have upcoming fights. And we even have an 11-year-old that's ranked number 3 in the nation and is poised to bring back a National Silver Gloves title back to the city of Roanoke through Champs Gym. And my concern is the spread of misinformation. Last year, a former councilman came to me and said, well, I heard you're looking for a bigger building and that your building's full of mold. And that is not true. Nobody in our organization has ever been looking for another place to move our program, and the building has no mold in it. And the next day is...
Go ahead, continue.
Okay. On June 30th, 2022, I made a call to the Economic Development Office, who oversees our lease, informing them that I was going to send in an intent to renew our lease. At that time, I was told that another organization called REACH was scheduled to move in on December the 1st, and that they had thought our organization was defunct, was the word used, or no longer existing and not operating, which is untrue. So we were called into a meeting on July the 14th, where we did formally file our intent to renew our lease. And they were questioning about us subleasing the building, which also was untrue. And I asked where that came from, and they told me it came from the group REACH, which nobody in our organization has ever had contact with. So the next contact I've had with the Department of Economic Development was a letter that they had sent by mail, which they were supposed to give us at least a 60-day notice of intent not to renew, which the letter was dated on the last possible day it could have been dated. But it wasn't sent out to the next week, and it was just sent by regular mail. No email follow-up, no telephone follow-up. And we received it sort of in the middle of October. And basically my concerns is the city going into negotiations with another group to move in to our location without even contacting us while we are under lease contract. And I think that's improper, and we weren't served in a timely manner according to the lease, whereas our intent to renew our lease was sent way in the summer ahead of time. They had also promised by email that they were going to send us the proposal criteria, and somehow we were left from the email list also. And by the time I got the criteria from the department, it was right before Thanksgiving, and there's not adequate time to meet all of their, all of the commitment orders. And I think this ought to be looked into, and our position is that the proposal ought to be removed. Our lease ought to be honored for another 3 years. And that's our position. And I think somebody ought to look into it, because if we were late, but then our intent to renew, then I don't think we would have a shoe to stand on.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Banks. I'm going to ask you to refer those concerns to our city manager to work it out. And any members of council have any questions, Mr. Manager?
I've got some concerns.
Yes.
All right, well, I'll start.
Just for clarity, there is currently an RFP that is issued. You may recall that the council authorized to issue the RFP, and that was because of the lease terms. If you remember, there was a discussion regarding the lease was coming due, as Mr. Banks has indicated, not coming due, coming to expire for renewal. At that time, they were informed that we were actually going to pursue an RFP process, which certainly they can submit for and seek to continue to use the building, as would other parties. There have been no agreements reached with anyone. Matter of fact, the RFPs are not due until, I think, sometime in mid-December. And we can certainly talk more about your ability to be able to submit the RFP timely, or if we need to extend the deadline or what have you. We can certainly talk more about that as well.
Okay,
Mr.
well,
Well, I'm going to get it back, get a chance to ask. All right, Vice Mayor, you had a question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, Mr. Banks said he submitted his intent to renew his lease back in the summer, and there must have been some gap in communication or miscommunication, because, is that what you said?
That was,
yes.
if you recall, we were actually, council and myself, were having discussions about whether or not we were going to actually issue an RFP or whether we would renew the lease, as had been requested. And that was the conversation that was going on. And it was actually the last day that was possible before we actually were able to return that notice that we were not going to renew the lease automatically, that we're going to go through that RFP process. So that was the time gap between when we did receive the information about their intent to renew the lease and the issuance of the RFP. If you recall, this was all tied up with box fit. I mean, this is all related to the same piece of this, so.
We have nothing to do with box fit. That's another thing.
Hold up. Okay. Well, I'm going to refer him, but did you have some questions, Ms. Price?
Well, thank you.
Well, we all a little
Yeah, we all
confused on
have
certain
concerns,
things. So
and-
I want to ask him to meet with the city manager to
Okay.
sort this out, so we'll know.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
And actually, Mr.
Thank you.
Banks, so you don't have to wait for this entire meeting to end.
But I did.
Brent, can you raise your hand?
Well, go ahead. If you wanna
So,
ask
Mr.
him.
Banks, will
Yes.
you provide your contact information with
Mr.
Brent?
Banks,
And then we'll go from there.
Councilmember Moon Reynolds has a
Yes, I
question.
do have a question for you, sir.
Yeah.
Is that if your lease is not renewed in the amount of time you have had access to the facility, what are your plans, or where do you have anywhere else to go? I guess it's the same thing we asked of Mr. Woodbury. What happens with the people you're working with, the child that's going into the tournament and all of that? What happens? What will occur?
Well, basically, we'll be shut down, and our organization will allow Mr. Woodbury to run a summer program at our facility, but he has nothing to do with our program.
Right, okay, you said that. Thank you on that.
Okay, thank you. We'll sort this out
Yes,
and get
and
back
Bob,
to
I did have a question
Sure.
with regards to, I know we were leasing to him, you said Fire Station number 6, and we have other fire stations that we lease to. Are they going to go up for renewals as well, or to be put out to bid?
I don't think we have any fire stations currently under lease. We actually have sold a
Oh,
number of
sold
fire
them, okay.
stations. I think this is the only one we actually have still under a lease arrangement. And it is, and I don't recall, Mr. Banks may know, there was a set period of time that the lease was valid for, then there was the ability to renew those leases as they went along. And at any time, the council could either just simply end the agreement or seek renewal or seek other proposals. At the time, again, in conversation with council, because you knew there were others interested in the building as well, you thought it most appropriate to go through the RFP process so that you could decide what best to do with this building as we move forward, which may very well continue to be used in the way that is currently being used. But so no, I believe this is the only one we actually have under lease.
And that, so in other words, would that same process affect the one we were talking about for Mr. Woodbury when council had the conversation?
Yes, so if, for example, the draft agreement that we had presented to you all has a set period of time for that lease, and then same thing, that lease, when it ends, either could be renewed by the council or not. It could seek other proposals for it at that time. Yes, that would be exactly the same structure.
So your full 3 years will be up this year, or you had an additional year left?
It was up December the 1st.
Okay, that's pretty clear.
And we are, as Mr. Banks has indicated, at this point, we're simply honoring the terms of the lease as we work our way through the process. We've simply informed them that the council has not automatically renewed the lease, but nobody's been required to remove from the building, nor will they be, until we figure out what happens next. They may not leave, because it may be that you choose to actually enter into a new lease with them as well.
Right, okay, that's what I wanted to hear. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Banks. Let me just say I'd like to see that young man who is number 3 in the nation.
Well, I have a picture of him. I actually brought a packet for each of the council members and the mayor.
Thank you for
pass that
that.
out, huh?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
And his name is Bryson Mank.
Okay,
Thank you.
great.
All right, thank you.
And Mr.
Thank
Banks,
you.
if you would just give your contact information to Brent, then we can talk further. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Madam Clerk.
Yes, sir, we have another speaker. That is Penny Warden.
Afternoon.
No.
I'm a shorty. I come to y'all this afternoon about the homeless situation in Roanoke. As I myself just became homeless for the second time since COVID and experiencing it, me and my 2 service dogs became homeless around the end of May, first part of June, when the townhouse that I was living in, the two occupants that lived next door to me were brothers and severe alcoholics. To give you an example, from May to date, they've each been in and out of the hospital 11 or 12 times each. And one has started having seizures. It got so bad. So, to my understanding, the city was stepping in because they had a bad bed bug infestation and chiggers. And the apartment or the townhouse was to be condemned, and I think they were going to try to place them in some kind of not like a nursing home, but a group setting or something where they could be watched and taken care of. I don't know what happened with that situation. But at that time, I became homeless. I'm on disability. I've had 3 back surgeries, and I have 2 service dogs that helped me with that. And I had a car at the time, and I had a part-time job at IHOP. The only thing that I could do was to get me a motel room. And it ended up, for the last September, October, November, and now December, I have spent my entire disability check, which will only cover 8 to 9 rooms in a motel. I stayed 7 days in the month of September, and I attended all the Ram House, Hat Team, everywhere, social services everywhere I could go, and was being told that there was no help for me. IHOP actually wrote me a letter and gave me permission to stay in their parking lot in my car with my dogs for 16 days to keep me from losing my job. And I must say that they took better care of me than my government did. They fed us, they made sure we were taken care of. After about 16 days on a Saturday night, after they closed at 12, there were cameras outside, and thank God I had my service dog with me. She's about 110 pounds. She helps me from falling and stuff, so she had to be a big dog. And she helps me in and out of chairs, bathtub, and up and down steps. I have a lot of balance issues. 3 men approached me from behind my car. Now, I do not know what their intentions were, but when I opened the trunk, my big dog went over my head and knocked the one off his bicycle, and the other 2 run. And they had this on camera, so that got me my Section 8. That was the last part of September, first part of October. I have now gone from having to sell my car to keep us in a motel room to still being homeless. I'm paid through till tomorrow, and I can't seem to find affordable housing. I've been as far as Princeton, and there just seems to be nothing out there, and I don't understand it. I don't understand our homeless vets, and that's just totally unacceptable to me. I started a petition when I decided to address y'all, and just last night in 30 minutes on the first floor and half of the second floor, I probably got close to 100 signatures, and I just stopped it there. I haven't even hit the streets, the other motels. Mission, Ram House, I seen how bad it was right here. I didn't need to go any further. I did some research too, and a lot of the questions that people wanted me to ask was, let's see, I think it was last or this year you received $2.4 million, and we'll receive another $2.4 million in 2023, which was published November the 3rd of this year, Channel 10. What is that money being used for? Why do we have so many homeless? Why is there not affordable housing? How are women and children and men expected to get out at 7 o'clock every morning from the Roanoke Mission with children and find a job and housing?
Okay. Are those your comments?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, I'm not going to get into the figures that you mentioned, but I'll refer you again to our city manager, and maybe he can direct you as to where you could go.
And who is your city manager?
Ms. Cowell there.
Ms.
I've
Warden,
talked to Keith Holland. He had no answers either.
well, Ms. Warden, is the phone number you have on here, that's your correct phone number?
Yes, sir.
And so you said you talked with the HAT team. You're currently in the system, in the registry system with them?
Yes, have been since September.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And because the reason I'm asking that is so that I can follow up with Matt Cruikshank with the homeless assistance team. Sounds like you may have received a voucher, but you've not actually found housing to use that voucher?
Well, they had found me an apartment a month ago, and apparently somebody had to be evicted, and it had to be totally remodeled, and there was an issue with getting doors in. I spoke with her this morning, and she's telling me probably a couple more days. If I pay for a couple more days in a motel room for me and my dogs, there went my rent deposit.
Okay. Well, I'll be, either I or somebody else, but we'll be back in touch then, so, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, man.
Thank you for coming.
The next speaker is Owen McGuire.
Council members and Mr. Mayor, thank you for listening to me today. I'm back here again to speak about the proposed sale of parkland at Fishburne Park. I believe Fishburne Park is considered one of the 4 premier parks in Roanoke, along with Allen, Washington, and Mill Mountain. And I believe it should be as much as possible conserved for future generations without being developed as a commercial development that is being currently proposed. I have here, this is our Grandin Court neighborhood plan. It's the most current one. It's not real new, but it is the most current one. And some of the comments in here, or some of the things in the plan were, quote, residents noted the need to maintain the quality of the wooded spaces that they enjoy. Another quote in here is, maintain and improve the current green space and natural resources. And residents should be involved in neighborhood improvement and advocacy. Maintain and enhance the recreation, parks, and open space. Maintain and increase the tree canopy. Preserve the wooded areas. And all that's being threatened by this current proposal being made by the city. I was a little taken back at the last meeting I was here, and I heard somebody say that our parks are really just a liability. They cost the city money. We have to maintain them. They don't generate any income. And if we can convert them to residential or commercial property, then it would generate income for the city. Some people have that opinion. I think it's rather sad. The current developers say they're going to always keep this piece of land as a natural park, yet they want it rezoned commercial. So after a few short years, they would be able to sell it without any interference from anybody else and turn it into a restaurant, a bar, or a number of other different commercial enterprises. I know economic development and city management are looking for the quick fix on this thing. They consider it excess property, and the house is why they're using that. But the land associated with it is much more important than really the house and everything, because that will be there forever. And if it goes through as it's planned, then we're going to have a commercial corner down there. I don't know if everybody wants that or not, but anyway, thank you for the time to listen to me today.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Dottie Clifton.
I'm Dotsy Clifton, and I'm a member of the Equitable Policing Coalition, which is a grassroots, multiracial group focusing on issues of trust and transparency with the Roanoke City Police Department. The group has been meeting since 2018 and has conducted outreach to both the local community and the police to ensure Roanoke City is a community where all racial groups feel equally treated by and fully protected by law enforcement. From the outset, we want to make clear that we condemned any attempt to rescind or roll back the policing initiatives without first a careful examination of the statistical data related to what does and does not work in terms of decreasing violence, criminal violence. The EPC is indeed sensitive to the current difficulty of building and maintaining a police force, and of the outcry throughout our entire community to do something, anything, to stop the violence that is snuffing out lives and creating unspeakable grief and fear in the hearts of community members. Yes, we hear that. However, this action of asking the state legislature to rescind the policing reforms put in place by the previous administration will not affect the murder rate in Roanoke. Data indicate, on the contrary, that this generalized get tough on crime response, while it might serve to placate a public crying out for something to be done, is likely instead to further alienate and increase distrust and pain in the very people the police are charged to serve and protect. Lowering the standards for stop and search is guaranteed to damage the already fragile relationship between the police department and the African American community. And with the very citizens, police are asking them to trust them enough to come forth with information. We agree that something needs to change, but this simplistic reaction to kind of a knee-jerk, because it's easy to say, let's get tough on crime, reaction to a deep, complex problem is clearly not it. We don't have the answer, but history and research clearly show this particular political response is likely to backfire in ways detrimental to both the police force and the innocents. I only have 2 sentences. The unanimous decision to ask the Virginia General Assembly to roll back criminal justice reform is not the kind of well-considered action citizens concerned with racial justice have come to expect from this largely respected and trusted city council. We ask you, as responsible council meeting, to pause and examine the data as we have before moving forward with this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was the last speaker.
All right, thank you. All right, we now move down to the item number 4, which is the consent agenda. All matters listed under the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the members of City Council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of the item. If discussion is desired, the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. I now need a motion for the consent agenda to be approved.
Move to consent agenda. Second.
All right, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Vice Mayor White Boyd.
Aye.
Mr. Cobb. Aye. Ms. Moon Reynolds.
Aye.
Ms. Price.
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez Jones.
Aye.
And Mayor Lee.
Aye, and the consent agenda is approved. Thank you. Item number 5 is public hearings. We have none today. Item number 6 is petitions and communications. Item 6.1 is the State Criminal Alien Assistance Program, FY21 grant. There is a resolution.
Move the resolution. Second.
Madam Clerk, could you please read the title paragraph?
A resolution authorizing acceptance of the State Criminal Alien Assistance Program grant made to the city of Roanoke Sheriff's Department by the Bureau of Justice Assistance Office in conjunction with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, and authorizing execution of any required documentation on behalf of the city.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or comments by members of council? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor White Boyd.
Aye.
Mr. Cobb.
Aye.
Ms. Moon Reynolds.
Aye.
Ms. Price.
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez Jones.
Aye.
Mayor Lee.
Aye, and the resolution passes. Thank you. We got a budget ordinance.
Move the budget ordinance.
Is there a second?
If Vivian says yes. Ms. Sanchez Jones.
Okay, I can't hear you.
Second.
Okay. All right, Madam Clerk, would you please read the title paragraph?
An ordinance to appropriate funding from the federal government for the State Criminal Alien Assistance Program and for an administrative adjustment amending and reordaining certain sections of the 2022-2023 grant fund appropriations and dispensing with the second reading by title of this ordinance.
Thank you. Is there any discussion by members of council? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor White Boyd.
Aye.
Mr. Cobb. Aye. Ms. Moon Reynolds.
Aye.
Ms. Price.
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez Jones. And Mayor Lee.
Aye, and the budget ordinance is approved. We're now down to item number 2, which is a presentation of the judges of the Juvenile and Domestic Relations Court to share information on the efforts of the judges and the court to provide added value to the citizens of the city of Roanoke. This is sponsored by Council Member Cobb and Price. And I'm pleased to recognize the Honorable Judge Frank Rogers, who will give us the presentation.
Mayor, Madam Vice Mayor, members of council, good afternoon and happy holidays.
All right, Judge.
Thank you for allowing us time on your meeting schedule today. And by us, I mean myself, Judge Ferguson, Heather Ferguson, Judge Friedman had planned to be here, but unfortunately, several young folks over the weekend got in some trouble and were detained, and she had to have a hearing for them at 1:30 as required by law. And she may slip in if time allows, but if not, she sends her regrets. By us, I also mean Michelle Asparagosa, who is our clerk, and a number of her staff who are also here this afternoon. We brought everybody who wasn't on vacation and who didn't have to stay in the office to take care of customers. So we're really here first and foremost to say thank you for the support you, city staff, and everybody that we work with has for our court. And I specifically want to make sure that I recognized the city manager, Mr. Cowell, his deputy, Mr. Greer, and Mr. Greer's predecessor, Mr. Stovall, who have been instrumental in the support that the city has shown for our court. And I wanted to mention 3 specific areas of support this afternoon. First, the most obvious are the renovations that have taken place to our floor at the courthouse. On September 29th, you toured the work, and you saw it mostly complete, but it's gone really now to almost all complete, especially in our area. And I'm having Michelle scroll through some before and after photographs so you can see the changes that you have made. And generally speaking, you've improved security. You have created a more open, inviting, and efficient workspace for our clerks. And most importantly, you have vastly improved the waiting and service areas for the benefit of the public. We are most excited about artwork that our city children have done. They were asked to create works that would send messages of hope and strength or offer opportunities for welcome distraction. We worked with Doug Jackson, your arts and culture coordinator, and Doug introduced us to Heather Marshall, who used to teach art at Fleming and still has her hand in the good works that are being done around the city. And she was awarded a Year of the Artist grant to oversee this project. And you'll see the work is colorful, imaginative, sometimes whimsical, sometimes very serious, but all done by Roanoke City kids, including a couple pieces that were done by residents of the Roanoke Valley Juvenile Detention Center. This project was funded by the Arts Commission with a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts and contribution from the city's Percent for Art Fund. The piece that you see here was donated by the widow of Jimmy Deck. That name may be familiar to many of you. I see smiles on your faces. He passed away recently, and as luck would have it, his widow wanted to make a contribution in recognition of his 30 years of service to the Roanoke City Public Schools as an art educator, and his nurturing influence on those in the community that he touched throughout his life. So we're delighted to have that piece in our waiting area. We have a new children's room. The mural was done by Ms. Heather Marshall with inspiration and help from some of her students, and it's been furnished by CASA, which is our court advocate program for children, a division of Children's Trust. They very generously donated all the furnishings. And actually, this mural got a Facebook presence over the weekend. A local nonprofit posted it on its website, making the point that studies have shown that artwork depicting nature can have significant effect on reducing stress and anxiety. And of course, that's exactly what we're looking for when we have this in an area where children can either wait to testify in court or just be entertained while their parents or their guardians do so. We also received a grant from the Roanoke Law Foundation to improve the area on our floor, but previously serviced by our court service unit intake office. They've moved over to this building, leaving that space unoccupied. So we were able to give the Department of Social Services a satellite office, the Court Services Unit satellite office, and then 2 rooms for attorneys to meet with clients and witnesses before court in a very private way. So we're grateful to the Roanoke Law Foundation for that grant. Soon we'll have a kiosk. We're just now waiting, running the power to the spot where it's going to be located. That will be in our waiting area where members of the public can make payment of their child support obligations without having to find ways out to the DCSE office off Peters Creek Road. And then finally, by a grant from the Virginia Department of Criminal Justice Services, we're going to have a resource kiosk again in the waiting area where we'll be able to display literature and other informational items for the benefit of the public who might be waiting to have their court cases heard. Because of the superb planning and all work on this project being done at night, our court did not lose a single minute of time serving the public. We did not lose a single minute of courtroom time, and all hearings were conducted as scheduled. And that's a tribute to, I think, the city's engineering office, Luke Pugh and Terry Kemp in particular, and also to the Sheriff's Department. We had to have somebody there at night while these people worked, and the deputy sheriff worked overtime in order to make that happen. I wanted to mention the budget item of $1,000. It's not a lot, but it's significant in a way that I'll get to in a minute. And then Also, thank you for the stipend that you pay our deputy clerks. It's $3,000 a year, and that is significant. State law allows municipalities to support the pay of our deputy clerks, and because you all do that, our clerks are able to recruit and retain quality people. And I can tell you right now, I think our clerk's office has the best staff that I have seen in the 8 years that I have been a judge. So thank you for that as well. And I will simply add this note of thanks to Mr. Cowell. Because of the pandemic, the city couldn't pay the stipend, but he was kind enough and gracious enough to include our clerks as city employees for pandemic and hazardous duty pay. So thank you, Mr. Cowell. So the city has significantly invested in our court, and we'd like to think that investment is a good one, and I wanted to share some reasons why. First of all, the work we do, assisting the city's children and families day to day, and we take our work very seriously, and you can imagine at times it's difficult. Not every case ends successfully, despite our best efforts, but many do. Delinquent children don't reoffend. Truant children go to school and get their high school diplomas. Children get needed services and stop running away or engaging in risky behavior. Children get protection from their parents when needed, especially parents who themselves need services. And abused or neglected children who are removed from their parents' care are ultimately reunited with their families. I can tell you that there is a lot of great work being done by the agencies who serve our court. Some city agencies, some not. These are our partners, our stakeholders. These are the men and women who daily and singularly are devoted to improving the lives of Roanoke City children and their families. Our court has a best practice team. This is a multidisciplinary team led by Judge Ferguson. It includes judges, our clerk, a pediatrician, our court services director, and a number of city employees, including Mr. Spencer, Steve Martin, our DSS director, Julie Payne and Katie Van Patten of the CSA office, and finally Jennifer Crook, who's also here, an assistant attorney for the city who regularly represents the Department of Social Services. We meet quarterly, and in addition, we host quarterly breakfasts for our stakeholders. That's where the $1,000 goes, $250 per breakfast. And again, it's not a lot and it's not elaborate, but it's just something nice that we do to help get folks together on this quarterly basis to talk about things of interest to our court and to those who serve our court. For instance, last meeting, we heard about Mr. Merchant's reset program. We also plan and execute an annual day-long workshop for our court stakeholders. The last one was on the various aspects of domestic violence and was very well received. The team also presented just last Friday a half-day workshop on prescription medication and trauma in children. About 50 people attended that workshop. We believe that knowledge is power, and shared knowledge is shared power. And when I say power in this context, I mean power to improve outcomes for children and families who appear in our court. Through the good work of our best practices team, Roanoke City applied for and became an implementation site through the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges in 2021. We're only the second court in Virginia to be so selected. And with their guidance, we have done an intensive self-evaluation of how we handle child dependency cases. We found that we're doing things mostly very well, but we also found room for improvement, and a couple of initiatives are underway in that context. Judge Ferguson leads a team that is working on involving children more, that is foster care children, more in their court proceedings. They have formulated a trauma-informed protocol which DSS has endorsed, and they've even started producing a video that they will share with children coming to court for the first time. It's just been amazing work that they have done. Another team that I lead is trying to improve the quality of family time for children in foster care. Family time is something that used to be called visitation, and typically at DSS was 1 or 2 hours every week or every 2 weeks in an observation room at DSS. This team is tackling the idea of expanding that into the community. We've developed through Julie Payne a list of libraries and parks and other places where perhaps kids can visit with their biological parents in a more natural setting and improve the time that they have with their parents. We're also pleased that the Roanoke Law Foundation is assisting DSS in improving the observation and visitation rooms or family time rooms at DSS. They had gotten a little dated and a little old, so they're working on updating that for us significantly. And here's what 1,000 books looks like. As a site team, we were able to take advantage of a grant opportunity and took delivery of these books several months ago. We'll be handing them out to children. We'll also have them in the children's family room, and everybody is welcome to take one. And we hope that they will. Other things that we're working on, we'd like to have a facility dog. The sheriffs will tell you that our floor is the most volatile floor in the courthouse. With what we deal with, tensions run high, and we'd like to think that the presence of a facility dog might ratchet that down. Jennifer Crook has taken the lead on that and is working with Paws for a Cause, a Michigan nonprofit. We have learning lunches for staff. This is a Friday every other month. Judges pay for lunch, and we present programs to the staff of interest either to them or what we think would be of interest in the court. Again, the idea being that knowledge is power. We have an intern, third-year law student. This is Murphy Bars. He's our 6th intern. This is something that we love doing. And we get as much out of it, I think, as they probably get out of being with us. But we believe that having interns and furthering the education of our young folks is important. We've had a number of collaborations with the Sheriff's Department, including a new video station in court holding. You say, why is this important? Well, it doubled the capacity and allows us to do our arraignments starting at 8:30 rather than having to wait for General District Court to finish theirs and therefore start our 9 o'clock dockets late. That way the public can have their cases heard on time. And then we're going to have a safe exchange zone. This is the parking lot to the west of the courthouse. And once that dumpster gets removed, we can finally do it. But the sheriff has made all the arrangements and gotten approval from everybody in the courthouse. Every other locality has one. Now we will too. And I'm pleased to say we even had a little hand in economic development for the city. In August this year, for the very first time, Roanoke hosted the Conference of District Court Judges for Virginia. 350 judges and 100 significant others were in town Sunday through Thursday. The hotel did its usual fantastic job, and they worked with Virginia's Visit Blue Ridge to make this even more special for attendees. Our thought was if they came and had a great experience, they would want to come back, and I'm pleased to tell you that they will be back in 2024, and we hope many other times in the years to come. When I became a judge, I had to go to school. The Supreme Court called it pre-bench. We called it judges' school. And they took us out to Bon Air in Richmond. That's the juvenile Penitentiary, and gave us a tour, and then they gave us some information, and we learned in our meeting that our area, and Roanoke in particular, had the fewest number of commitments to the Department of Juvenile Justice. So I asked the question, why is that? What's going on out in Roanoke? And they said, we're not real sure, but we think it's because you all take care of your own. So we think of the kids we see as our kids. We think of the families we see as our families. And we will continue to work for our kids and our families in our diverse community for as long as we possibly can do so, with your support, of course. And I'd like to conclude this afternoon with a personal note of thanks to my friend Anita Price and my friend Bill Paspech. I'm sorry Bill's not here, both of whom are leaving council at the end of this month. Both have served the citizens of Roanoke with distinction, with a sincere sense of public service, and they have done so for many years. Roanoke is a better place for your tenures, and I thank you for that. The rest of you, I know to varying degrees. Ms. Sanchez-Jones, I'd rather be up there than down here. So we will continue to see you all and the new faces that will be joining you next month, and we will look forward to working with you in the days, weeks, and months to come. Mr. Mayor, if there are any easy questions, I'd be happy.
We got some easy one for you, Judge. Thank you for the presentation. And I'm going to ask the people that sponsored this presentation, Ms. Price, and followed by Councilmember Carr.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you letting me go first. Judge Rogers, first of all, I thank you for those kind comments, and thank you for this presentation that you gave. As you mentioned, when we had the opportunity to go through and see for ourselves the new and improvements in the renovations, it does make a difference because, you know, when families and children have to come into a court setting, that's traumatizing enough. So to see how it's been brightened and more welcoming is certainly a step in the right direction. And then I wanted to just comment on something you said about we take care of our own. And I thought how true that is, that Roanoke truly does take care of our children, and we try to do our very best. Of course, we're not going to always have everything, just as we heard, you know, earlier today from that dear lady who was speaking previously, but we try. And it's because we have judges such as yourself, who I know from experience, you have a true, sincere compassion for children. And you know what, I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to publicly thank you. I think every event that our Youth Services Board has sponsored for our kids throughout the city, you've been there. And as you have said, you know, it's just great to see young people engaged in positive activities and being, for the most part, a lot of them, because they kind of run the show, but to see them in positive leadership positions. So thank you so very much, and we will continue to see one another, I'm sure.
I sincerely hope so.
Absolutely.
Okay, Mr. Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Judge. I wonder if first you would be willing, this is not a test, but I wondered if you'd be willing to introduce your team that's here today.
Yes, Teresa Daniel, Laura Kessler, Vicki Hanger, Will Scott. Morris. Jennifer Crook is kind of an ancillary member of our team. Seems like she's in our court every day. Judge Ferguson, of course, Faye Hurst, Julie McNutt, and Kylie Dixon. And of course, I introduced Michelle.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
I was curious to know, and I feel really good about our juvenile justice system and particularly the way that you work with our foster kids and foster families. Can you talk a little bit about any emerging issues you're seeing related to foster care, why children are coming into foster care? I know you look at kind of the whole approach, and often you see the whole picture in ways that citizens and others may not see the whole picture. So I wondered if you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Sure, thank you. I'm not sure council is aware, but at last check, and that was last week, Roanoke City DSS had the largest number of kids in care of any other jurisdiction in Virginia. And I'm not talking per capita, I'm talking about raw numbers. That's been a challenge to DSS staff. It's been a challenge to our court to make sure that these cases get heard timely because they're on a timeline, and also thoroughly. I would say, and this is me personally, but I've had discussions with other judges about it, parents using drugs is the primary thing we see. And if that's not the primary cause for contact with the department, then that becomes a cause that you get to eventually. So I guess we're all challenged as to how to deal with drugs, but in terms of impacts on children that are coming into foster care, parental use, especially kids being born substance exposed, is a big reason our census is so high.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Any other council member have any comments?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judge. And Judge Ferguson, thank you. Thank all of you.
Mr. Mayor, if I can too, I just want to thank Judge Rogers and his staff as well, because they're great to work with. So, and that doesn't always come for granted. I don't want to take that for granted. So they're great to all the judges, actually. We've done a lot of work over in the courthouse, and they're trying to conduct their business and doing so with all that construction activity going on. And they have been very accommodating and very good to work with. So I want to say thank you as well. So.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, now I'm pleased to recognize our city manager who will take us through our briefings.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We have two briefings today. The one, of course, is our monthly briefing for the gun violence prevention framework, and as has been the case here recently, we will continue to get the brief presentation from the chief on kind of bringing us up to date on both incidents of gun violence, but also areas around actions that they have taken and successful arrests, as well as any kind of outcome relative to the courts. And then, as has been requested here recently as well, we'll have a presentation or two from folks that are engaged with the Gun Violence Prevention Commission and some of the grant work as well. After that briefing is done, then we'll be talking about neighborhood centers plans, and I'll come back and introduce that item. And with that, if the chief will come up, we'll get started with the chief. So.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council. Here I am again. It seems like I always get to speak with you after all of the good news has been shared, and here I come with not so good news. So hopefully we can work with my boss, the deputy city manager, so we'll have an opportunity to share good news of things that we're doing at the police department. But in terms of the gun violence update for the month of November, as I usually start out talking about seized firearms, for the month of November, we seized 33 firearms, which brings us to a grand total of 349 firearms that have been seized year to date. Moving on to the warrants, for the month of November, we served a total of 580 warrants, 155 of those being felony warrants. And then on to the incidents involving gunfire. So on November the 5th, officers responded to the 100 block of Campbell Avenue after they were on patrol and heard a single gunshot fired. At their arrival, the officers found an adult male with a male victim with what appeared to be obviously a very critical gunshot wound. The victim was then transported to the hospital, and the offender had already fled the scene by the time the officers had arrived. An investigation is still ongoing into this incident. On November the 6th, officers responded to the 700 block of 29th Street Northwest in reference to a reported gunshot wound. Upon their arrival, they located an adult male with multiple gunshot wounds. The victim was transported to the hospital where he later died from his injuries, and the detectives are currently continuing to work this case as an active investigation. On November 9th, officers responded to the 1100 block of Pilot Street Northwest in reference to an individual being shot. Upon arrival, the officers located an adult male suffering from a non-life-threatening gunshot wound. The victim was transported to the hospital, at which time our officers was able to talk with him. He denied knowing the identity of the offender, who had already fled before the officers arrived. An investigation into this incident is ongoing. On November the 17th, officers responded to the 1100 block of Forest Park Boulevard in reference to a reported gunshot wound. The victim was an adult male and had left the scene in a personal vehicle before the officers arrived to seek medical attention. Law enforcement officers then responded to the hospital to meet with the victim, who had a non-life-threatening gunshot wound and was uncooperative with the investigation. However, this investigation is also ongoing. On November the 18th, officers responded to Roanoke Memorial Hospital, where an adult male suffering from a gunshot wound had arrived via personal vehicle seeking medical care. The victim reported that he had been shot while walking in the 4800 block of Valley View Boulevard. Upon officers interacting and engaging with questions, the victim denied seeing who shot him and was unsure of important factors or circumstances related to this incident. This investigation is also open and ongoing. On November 20th, officers responded to Roanoke Memorial Hospital, where an adult male suffering from a gunshot wound arrived seeking care. It was determined that the incident originally occurred in Southeast, near Church Avenue and 8th Street. Despite lack of cooperation from the victim in this incident, this remains an ongoing investigation. There was one firearm-related suicide that occurred on November 7th in Southeast. In the way of prosecutions and court proceedings, our federal task force officers attached with our federal law enforcement partners were able to make several key charges this month. These charges include Corey Lee Muse, who was indicted federally on charges of 2 counts of possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, possession with intent to distribute narcotics in excess of 500 grams, possession of a firearm by felon in furtherance of drug trafficking. In this incident, 6 firearms were seized. There was also Mr. Donovan Allen Carrico, who was federally indicted with 1 count of Hobbs Act robbery, brandishing a firearm in commission of a violent crime, possession with intent to distribute narcotics, possession of a firearm in furtherance of drug trafficking, possession of a firearm by a prohibited person, and in this instance, 8 firearms were seized. Mr. Kai Lansana, was indicted for the July 2019 murder of 24-year-old Solania Evans. Throughout the course of the investigation, Mr. Lasagna, 32, of Alexandria, Virginia, was identified as a suspect in the homicide that occurred on Moorhead Avenue Southeast. Lasagna was indicted earlier in November for charges of first-degree murder, use of a firearm in commission of a felony, statutory burglary regarding this investigation. Lasagna was taken into custody in Frankfort, Kentucky on November the 9th by U.S. Marshals and held in the county regional jail. He was extradited back to Roanoke recently and served the aforementioned indictments and is currently in a secure facility awaiting trial. And finally, I generally talk about the reset deployments this month for the month of November. Reset deployed 3 times, 2 involving, all 3 actually involving gunfire, in which someone was hit by gunfire. And with that, I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
Chief, I just want to ask a question. Is it in your opinion, during the investigations, that most of the gun violence that is occurring in the city is between individuals that know each other, or is it just random? I think we've talked about that in the past, and it was something that I'm always concerned about, is just somebody got a gun out and just shooting at people, or shooting a chance, or just they know the individual that was involved in a gun incident.
Yes, that's a great question. It's a question in which we're asked all the time. It is very rare to have an incident of gun violence in which the two people involved, both the suspect and the victim, is not known to each other. In the very least capacity, they are definitely acquaintances. Sometimes that acquaintance will be from rival groups, or it may be two ex-boyfriend and a current boyfriend getting into an argument. But very rarely here in the city do we have an incident of gun violence and there is no association between the victim and the suspect.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Cobb.
Thank you, Chief, for this update. I know the reset team, along with some of the peacemakers, went on did a walk through one of our hotspot neighborhoods yesterday and had a really good turnout, and were very well received. I wanted to ask you on these two court cases, Mr. Muse and Carrico talks about, in the first case, 6 firearms being seized and 8 in the second. Do we know if these firearms were purchased legally, or if they were their property because of theft or illegally purchased? Do we have that information?
Yeah, without going into it too far, obviously these are cases that's still pending in court, but I can say that in very few incidences does someone go legally obtain a firearm and then use it in commission of a crime. And most of the time, in some capacity, that firearm is going to be retrieved by illegal means.
So you're saying these were likely
So I can't
illegal.
speak specifically to these incidents, but my knowledge and understanding and experience is that more often than not, the firearms that we come across in terms of seizing them, they are obtained through illegal means.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
I'll just say thank you, Chief. I know you said you don't bring good news all the time, but I will say 2 indictments is good news for those families who have lost a loved one and, could possibly see justice at the end of this trial. So I would say personally, I think that is good news, and thank you for all the work that you and your team are doing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
That is definitely good news. Again, I'll talk to Deputy City Manager Greer and hit about maybe coming back and talking to you outside of gun violence. Some of the great things that we're doing at the police department in terms of training, hiring, recruitment, things like that. So,
I think we're all agreeing that would be good. Yes.
did I mention I was going to ask Deputy City Manager Clarence Greer to? I'm kidding.
I'm sure he caught it.
Thank you for your time.
He didn't even look up. Did you see that?
He was writing it down.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chief.
And Mayor, I believe next is the Gun Violence Prevention Commission's updates as well.
Yes, we have 2 organizations that received violence interruption grants, and they're going to present today. The first is Hill Street Baptist Church, and Mr. Darnell Wood is here to make a presentation on their behalf.
Good afternoon. First of all, I want to thank Councilman Cobb, Councilwoman Reynolds, also Councilman Bestwich, and I see a young lady that walked with us also on November 12th. We had a walk from Macedonia Baptist Church to Pilgrim Baptist Church, 2.7 miles, and I must say we covered it fairly faster than I thought we would. And it was amazing to see. You have to get out in the neighborhoods, and that's what we've been doing with the grant. We went
and we walked, and people came. It was a beautiful day. People came out of their homes just to see what was going on and why we were walking. And the comments that the group got were amazing. And that shows that we have to get out in these neighborhoods. And my hat's off to the assistant manager and also Mr. Cowell for making that happen, because the steps you have to go through to get a permit to walk is unbelievable. You know, and I just put it to him. I said, in 3 months' time, we got 7 or 8 more fatalities within the city of Roanoke. But they helped us, and we got that through. When we initially got the grant, we had actually started to work before the monies was given to Hill Street. We started with Lucy Addison Middle School, and we did their 8th grade field promotion, where we went out and actually talked to probably 120 kids that were getting ready to matriculate to high school. Over the summer, we set up camp at Washington Park and Lincoln Terrace. Tuesdays and Thursdays, and also we'll hit the pool on certain days. And the swim pool is going to be a big impact come 2023, because, you know, I was told that the pool will start to be demolished as soon as it was closed. Well, I understand it has nothing been happened to the pool thus far. So come 2023, the City of Parks and Recreation made it available free on Mondays. The pool was jam-packed with kids. Had waiting people to go in for the maximum capacity was 250 people, and there was kids waiting to get in the pool every Monday. Where are they going to go next summer? I've been talking to Mike Clark. We have to develop some type of plan for the kids in Lincoln Terrace or Lower Northwest, something for them to do in the summer. We had a very diverse group during the basketball camps and things of that nature. We actually went over to Preston Park as well with the basketball camp, and of course a more diverse people, a group. There were some kids playing soccer. We had a group with them. The grant has done some things in these communities. Our biggest surprise, it shouldn't have been a surprise to me, but our biggest impact was on August 2nd, National Night Out in Lincoln Terrace. We had over 300 kids and the adults come over there. All the city EMS, fire, police, and sheriff were there. And, you know, one of the aspects that I found when we went to the Washington Park pool and the sheriff's resource officers and people were there, you'd be surprised of any child 12 years and older, they didn't want to take a photo with the police or sheriff. But you see a kid 3 and 4 and 5, they would run up to them and take a picture with them. That mindset, we have to get in these communities, get that mindset out. And when you say things happen in the community, why don't people talk? Well, if you see a 12, 15, 16-year-old see something happen in the community, they're going to keep their mouth shut. But you see that 3, 4, and 5-year-old, they will say something. So when we're going on these communities, we're trying to talk. And on August 2nd of this year, when we did the National Night Out, you could see that begin to happen. The Roanoke Police Department had their recruits over there, and I mean, they were actually engaging, and also the firemen, they were engaging these kids right there where they were. And I think that's a big plus for the city of Roanoke. And as we continue to do these projects, and the grant provides the community day cookouts, same thing in Loudon Avenue. We did one on Loudon Avenue. It just had great turnout. We provided free books and things. These grants it's not about giving these kids a meal. It's about getting out there and seeing them where they are, and that's one thing the grant does. Right now, to follow up, and one of the programs we have going on now, we have what we call a mental health barbershop within Lucy Addison Middle School, with the assistance of Superintendent White, Hill Street, and some of the black barbers within the city of Roanoke. Every second and fourth Monday, if a child has done something great in the school, they can't have any disciplinary issues or anything like that, and their parents have to sign off on it. But every second and fourth Monday, the black barbers come out from behind most of them are closed on Mondays. They come into the school, and after school, we sit down and have a rap session with them, provide them a meal or a snack, and they get a haircut. And we get to talk to them and make sure they're going in the right direction. But that's something we hope will be a success, and we can actually actually send it to some of the other schools. And we've been very frugal with this money. We don't just go out there and throw it away. And I'll just tell you, the $27,000 we were granted, of all the things we've done thus far, we've spent $5,000 of that money. So we've been very frugal with it. We want to make sure it gets a big impact where the dollar's supposed to go. But I want to thank you all for, because as I see it, and like I say, we've been using this money mainly in the Lincoln Terrace, Hunt Avenue, Afton Garden, 10th Street area, over towards Loudon and the Gainsborough area. And I must say, and maybe the good God's looking over us, our good God is looking over us, but we have not had any violent incidents in those areas. As you heard Chief Roman says, some of the places he said that, and I hope it continues that way. I know it has not to do with the grant money, but we're out there and we'll continue to be out there. We are doing trauma classes and things like that at Hill Street Baptist Church. They're on our website, our Facebook page, where you can actually go in and look at what's being on the Facebook page. And we have those, we do those as Facebook presentations as well, where people can just come on Facebook at Hill Street Baptist Church and look at the different types of events we have going on. But I first of all thank to the Crime Prevention Commission, because there's a whole lot more that needs to be done in Roanoke, but we have to get outside the walls wherever we're at. And I do like to acknowledge those persons who have assisted us, and we'll need to continue your getting your assistance in that matter. But thank you all so much.
Thank you.
All right.
I did have something to say.
Don, Ms. Wood, could you come back for some questions?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought y'all had all the answers. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, it's not a question, it's just a comment from me. First of all, I have to say this, and I hope I don't put you on the spot with it, but as a council member, I do want to wish my condolences to the passing of your mom.
You're welcome.
And then on the other side, having known her for 15 years, I mean, when I was 15, so you know how many years that has been.
Right.
And I have to truly say, a great woman.
Right.
For those who don't know, Miss Showalter, Wood Showalter, worked in the mental health services for over, I want to say 60 years.
Yeah, she was
much.
a nurse for 62 years.
Yes, and if it had not been for COVID,
right.
I think she would have still continued.
Yes.
And she just had a heart for the people. I recall when she would say, I'm going to work so others can go home during the holidays and be with their kids, because when she was working and you all were small, she didn't have that.
That's right.
And I just loved the way she cared about people, and her heart was really there. So I just want to say she will really, truly be missed.
Thank you.
And with and also just to say that although you are not a city resident anymore, I think you spend more time here. You should be considered as an honorary one because of your heart for the community, especially as you've said so many times, growing up in this community, in the Gainsborough, Hunt Avenue, Lincoln Terrace area, and you can tell that you're using that money wisely.
Yes.
And I just want to commend you on that.
Thank you a lot. Thank you. All right. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you all. Y'all have a great day.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce Michelle Davis, who I think some of us might know, and Rebecca Meadows from Boys and Girls Club.
Hello.
Yeah.
I'm going to use a line that Gwen Mason used, which is hello to my former friends and colleagues. It's so good to see you all. And I'd like to introduce Rebecca Meadows. Rebecca is currently our Senior Director of Programs at Boys and Girls Club, but as of January 1, she will actually be our interim CEO. I'll be stepping away from Boys and Girls Club, and I'm actually joining Boys and Girls Clubs of America in a government relations role, which I think is very appropriate. So I'm going to be working here. But I want you all to meet Rebecca and make sure that you've got a face to put with a name, because she's going to do a phenomenal job for our organization and for our community. She has worked at our organization here in Roanoke for 11 years. She has a heart for our kids, a heart for our families, and you all will love working with her. So I just wanted to take a brief moment to give you, I only have the first slide. Rebecca has all the rest of the slides. But to tell you all, thank you, first of all. The Gun Violence Interruption Grant is a tremendous opportunity for us to serve youth in this city. And we're really proud of the work that we do, and really proud of the work we are going to be able to do because of this grant. So we wrote the grant specifically for Check and Connect, and the Check and Connect program is a University of Minnesota evidence-based program that I first learned about from my colleague in Lynchburg, Virginia. Mark Sheehan, the CEO in Lynchburg, has used this program successfully for many years. And the purpose of the Check and Connect program is actually to find those kids, specifically in middle school, who are on the bubble, who don't have another connection to the school other than just having to be there for the school day. They don't have extracurricular activities. They're not engaged with a social group. They don't have anything else that keeps them engaged at school. And a lot of them don't have other adults in their life other than their teachers who really are checking in on them, thus Check and Connect. So this program, which we are currently training our staff on, we did purchase the program materials from the University of Minnesota, and we are currently training our full-time staff, will be implemented in January. And the framework of the program is up here on the slide, but we are really excited to take our previous work in mentorship and roll it into this Check and Connect program. I will tell you, our goal was to have this implemented in October, and we are a little bit behind, just like everybody else who has faced some staffing issues. It has been very hard for us to make sure that we've got the people on hand who are going to be there continuously in these students' lives once we start this program. So we are a couple months delayed, but really excited to begin the Check and Connect program in January and report back to you all on specifically that program. But we have been doing work with gun violence prevention, and I want to specifically outline some programs for you all, and this is where I'll turn it over to Rebecca. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. So our current mentoring program, the last 6 months or so, we've been rolling it over. We currently work with the Office of Juvenile Justice and Protection with their mentoring program, and we're converting that into this Check and Connect. So what does that look like right now? We've identified these 5 factors for impact. So we know, first off, we have to provide the safe place for our kids. Well-rounded programs with unique opportunities, affordable and accessible, that's key. And as Michelle touched on, those relationships with caring adults, whether they're staff or volunteers, and then providing hope and opportunity for them. So what does that look like? In 2022, so this year so far, Roanoke City, we've served 232 members. That doesn't even include our community outreach youth that we're serving through other avenues, but 232 children enrolled in attending our 9th Street location. 48 of those children are 13 years older or older, and 97 children are 11 years old or older. 47 of those kids were identified as having extra risk factors or challenges in their life and have already been paired and working with a one-on-one mentor that meets with them at least once a week outside of their additional programming that they already may be working on together. We run dozens of programs at Boys and Girls Club, but when we take all those things and we boil it down, we group it into 3 factors: academic support, healthy lifestyles, and character and leadership development. So this is the fun part, the pictures. So to see what that looks like when we talk about these mentoring opportunities and we talk about unique programming and hope and opportunity and exposure to options, that's what this looks like. On the left, you see a family night event where we invite our parents out to engage in fun things and educational things. It could be financial literacy. It could be, during COVID, we did a lot of programs on how to support your kid through hybrid and virtual learning. On the right, that is a power hour or tutoring session where the kids are doing a measurement activity and reinforcing what they're learning in math. We've got a lot going on here. Some of you may be familiar with our crop culture program. Our teens at 9th Street have a garden there on our property and up at Morningside. Through that, they learn business principles and gardening, and so they grow their own produce all year round, which is very impressive to me, and they sell it to Libe, and then they get to make decisions on how they run their business through that. In the middle, you see we're at one of the high schools, and we have a guest speaker that comes in and is talking about career opportunities. Top right corner, our kiddo Nate there is doing a filming project with some of his staff. biking. We've got down here a trip to UVA that took place early this fall. In the red shirt here, he is at Old Navy, and we took our kids, and that's part of our career exploration. And then this is just a shot of some conflict resolution programming we were doing. That particular activity is I statements. How do we communicate our feelings, our needs, our expectations of other people? So we have lots of exciting things going on at Boys and Girls Club right now. Again, really using a holistic approach to implement this mentoring program and make sure it's embedded throughout what we're doing at the club so that these kids have the most positive experience they can with us. And, you know, our goal is for that to enrich their lives and help them be where they want to be. So we are very grateful for your support.
And I will take that moment to wrap this up and just say that thanks to the gun violence prevention funding this year, we've been able to actually extend our outreach into William Fleming and into Patrick Henry High School through our youth employment program. So that's been a big part of that opportunity for us, which means we now have the inroads for this Check and Connect program to make sure that we are embedded in the school communities in Roanoke City schools when Check and Connect launches. So it has been our privilege to serve our kids, to work with our kids through these one-to-one mentoring programs, and to report back to you all today the impact that it has. We can tell you anecdotally it's tremendous. Our kids who are engaged in Boys and Girls Club specifically have lower risk behaviors. We have data every single year to show the number of teens who believe that they are able to help speak up when somebody is being bullied in school. 80% of our teenagers are able to report back that they feel that they have the voice to speak up when someone is being bullied. So when we talk about violence interruption, we're talking about giving kids the skills to speak up before the violence happens. So we're happy to provide council with a report, too, of some of those numbers and statistics. The number of our kids who expect to graduate high school on time is up to 95%. We have 82% of our students who are self-reporting A's and B's in school right now. So we're really proud of all of that work because together comprehensively we're creating that network and that net that's going to catch our kids when they need it the most. So I'll stop there. We promised 3 to 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Michelle, let me ask you something. How much was your grant?
$45,000.
$45,000?
Yes, sir.
When were you given that grant?
When were we given that grant?
Yeah.
To our best recollection, and I will tell you, we put this presentation together very quickly. It was in late spring, early summer.
How much have you all expended thus far?
I would say less than $5,000 of that. The work that we've done, the majority of the money will be spent in 2023 for salaries, for the mentors, the paid staff who go through the training. And I say that out loud, it's probably closer to $3,000, to be very honest with you. The money has been used simply to make sure that we were able to do the outreach into the high schools that we needed in order to form those relationships. The majority of the money will be spent. We've bought the training materials as another example, but it'll actually be spent with the staff salaries who are the paid mentors to run the Check and Connect program.
Okay.
I have a question.
Ms. Moon?
And when you mentioned your Check and Connect, and you just mentioned your training and the salary for the paid staff. Now, when this grant is no longer available, how will you continue your program?
Well, as I mentioned, making sure that we have someone who is going to stay and be there with our kids is critically important. The person who we had tapped to run this program when we wrote the grant left us for maternity leave, so it was for a great reason. But making sure we could hire somebody of that same quality has been top of mind for us. So someone who is coming in, we try and ensure that, I mean, we do a lot of grant-funded projects through Boys and Girls Club, so there's never a forever promise on anything we do, but we never take on more than we think we can continue to fund. So for this particular position, it's a full-time position that has other responsibilities outside of just Check and Connect. So that person will be able to, when this money runs out, continue in our teen center as a full-time teen center staff member where they can continue to run Check and Connect as a part of that teen center programming.
Thank you.
You have a question? Oh, Ms. Price?
Well, first of all, congratulations, Michelle. I guess we have some serious catching up to do. Yes. And Rebecca, it's good to see you as well, and I'll have to get down there. It's been a minute since I've come down and visit and be with the kids. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious about this reaching into William Fleming and Patrick Henry. Could you just give us a little, maybe a tidbit of how that work is being done?
Yep.
Or is it an after-school program?
It does take place after school. Mr. Freeman has been hugely instrumental in opening those doors. Chloe Johnson, who's been leading these initiatives, worked with Mr. Freeman, the school guidance departments, their resource folks that work with career development to coordinate with them. So it's a mixture of Boys and Girls Club current kids who we're seeing there that stay after school there, and then other children as well. So we partner through a couple of initiatives with folks like West End, PCC, CYP, and then beyond that, so those kids are coming, we're recruiting through those partnerships, and then we're working with the folks in the counseling office at the school to refer other children. So we are working with children that aren't actively engaged in any of our other community partnerships after school, but that are coming for these. They're usually about 10 weeks, and they partner with us for that. They do a mixture of on-site work there at the school and then field trips off-site.
Awesome. Is this connected in any way with 21st Century Program?
No, ma'am.
No. This is independent for
Yes.
you guys. Great. All right, beautiful. Thank you. I'll definitely be checking it out.
Well, thank you all so
Thank you.
much. It's so good to see you all, and we appreciate your time. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays.
Christmas, thank you.
Mayor, do you have anything?
I just wanted to announce a couple things coming up. This Thursday at 6 o'clock at the Martin Luther King statue is the annual Bridging the Community Gap event, which includes a peace walk to the holiday tree. So again, that will be at 6 o'clock on Thursday. On Saturday, December 17th, from noon to 4, Grades Over Guns Halftime Fest, which is an effort done by TAP and Kingdom Harvest Church International. This is what their monthly event for December. That will be held at Eureka Park Rec Center. And Fed Up is having their Christmas of Hope event for families affected by gun violence this coming Saturday, which is an opportunity to provide a special Christmas and holiday gathering for the families, gifts for the children, and then additional support. And they've been holding a monthly grief support group, which originally they thought they might draw 3 to 4 people, and they've had regular attendance of about 18 people at those events. So, thank you.
Thank you. Let me ask a question this may go to well, I know initially Mr. Carl, but also City Manager. I'm just looking at the numbers between two programs that were granted both together about $72,000. And we're about ending a year, and we got $62,000 left. I mean, what do we do with that money? Is that money carried over, or, I want to find out the answer to that first. So what are we doing? Because that's a lot of money that we have in here that, yeah, somebody could use it, I mean, sure. So what's the status with that? How's that process determined?
So when these organizations applied, the understanding was that these were, monies were to be expended over 2 years, not just 1 year. So this is 22 through 24. So that's why you're hearing that some of the money has been initially expended, some of it is not. It's another reason why we're doing monthly check-ins with the organizations, so that if it's looking like they're not going to need all of that money to expend their program, then we can evaluate and bring back to council money that's not being expended that could be reallocated in another way. But these are all ARPA dollars, so they have to be designated by the end of ’24. Correct. And they have to be designated by the end of '24, so they can be carried over. I mean, they can be expended beyond that time, but they have to be designated.
Yeah, they have to be what we would consider encumbered, so under a contract agreement by that time, and then, yes.
Right.
Is that
I guess we need more of an understanding of how this works. I'm just seeing that that's a lot of money that, and if they're gonna do more than what they did, you know, one group had a $27,000 grant. They spent $5,000, I think, which takes that to about $22,000. And so, I mean, are they giving these grants for a year? I don't see how they're going to spend $22,000 next year, so they're probably only spend probably around the range of $5,000. I'm just saying it's a lot of money that's out there that we probably could use in other ways. And there's some groups that are about to have spent, especially those groups with the $5,000 and the $10,000 grants, they're going to spend most of their money. That's going to be done. So can we carry that money, or do we make this, can we give it other programs that maybe not have the funding, that may be out of funding? Because that's a lot of money. I mean, I'm just doing basic math, not deep math, just basic math. And when you look out, and I'm just saying, if they only spend $5,000 this year, I don't see, let's say in the next year, and I don't know, I need to know what is a year. I guess a year from when they were allocated, or a year on the fiscal year. Those are a lot of things that I don't know, and maybe you all may know. How is that done? Because that's a lot of money out there that the taxpayer is going to say, hey, wait a minute, what are we doing and how we're spending that? Because we got a lot of holes out here in the community.
So you all have received a full list of the budget allocations and the funding allocations for all of these organizations. You've received the amount and the program. Part of our responsibility as a commission is to, and we have liaisons, every commissioner is liaisoned with different organizations to check their status, and including budget, how the programming is going. And at our meetings, starting in starting in December, we've been receiving those monthly reports, but we'll be hearing back from some of those, and I'll be glad to share those with you. Remember, this is over a 2-year time period. This was not a mini grant. It's a 2-year time period. So I don't expect that all of these programs will expend all of their dollars in the first year. They also submitted budgets, so we have access to their budgets. And I'm certainly glad to share any of that information that you all would like to see.
Yeah, that's why I like the fact that they're coming. We don't know how much they're spending and with that today, but I'm saying that all of my point is that it's, if this is an average and they're saying whatever the amount that they're given, and this is a 1 year, or they got 2 years, but it's really a lot of money is being carried over, and unless they have some unusual spending, and we got the list of the money that the programs got, but the key question is, how are they spending it? What's going on? That's the key point, and we find that out when they come in and talk to us. But if those numbers, these are large numbers, and we haven't heard but about 3 or 4 programs. And if we go through all the lists that we've got there, especially those that got over $20,000, I want to know what have they spent and how much are we carrying over. And again, and you get different versions. I didn't see it where, and I guess the upper money is, we do have a year or 2 to spend it. But I'm just want to make sure that we can spend it, and the question's gonna come, man, when they get these numbers, and we continue to have them come in and tell us what their balances are, what they spent over the year, over the time that they've had the money. If this is any indication of what it is, then I think we need to take a look at this and revisit this.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I would also like to add that I appreciate these organizations being good stewards of the money they've been given. They're not just outlandishly spending. They're being very frugal and very thoughtful in this, and I think we need to acknowledge that. And I would say if we're going to request this for the violence interruption dollars that came through ARPA, we should do it through all of the ARPA dollars.
I have no problem with that. I think we should do it.
Because I think the big picture is important, and I want to say how much I appreciate these organizations, not only for applying, but presenting thoughtful solutions, community-based solutions. And I want to make sure that we're honoring that, as well as honoring being good stewards of the dollars that are being expended in the community.
And I appreciate what they're doing, but when we talk about good stewards now, we're looking at what's being left. I want to question, what did they show us that would show they would use so much money? I'm saying they got a lot of money here that's being used. You get $45,000 and you only use $5,000. That's $40,000 you got left.
Mayor, I think one of the things that we can do to accompany the when the groups come and present is what we'll do is be certain that all the council members have a copy of the memorandum of agreement and the statement of work. And the reason I say that is because I'm going to step out of the gun violence piece for a minute and talk about like the Star City Works program, for example. This is the program we're doing in partnership with the Virginia Works and our Workforce Development Board. So when you look at that statement of work indicates that it's a 2-year contract that we've entered into with them. It's almost a 3-year contract. And it spells out what they intend on spending in year 1 as well as year 2 and so on. And what you'll see in that case, I'll use that one as an example, you see a certain amount of funding in the first year to do certain activities, and it'll be less than what they'll spend in the second year. So I think if we also, when folks come and present, I think if you also have a copy, not only of the list of who they are and what they received, but actually a copy of their contract, basically, that might help as well, because then you'll see how they anticipate. In a lot of these cases, these are not that they've only spent $5,000, that's what they intended on spending by this time, based off of the agreement, because they're spending the rest of the money as spelled out in the contract in either the school year coming up or the summer or whatever it might be. But I think that might help as well if we provide that information when these groups come and speak. And of course, all that information is available for all of them. It's just for our ARPA grants, there literally are hundreds of those, whether they're small businesses or these, but certainly for these Gun Violence Prevention Commission ones that are tied to ARPA dollars, we can certainly provide those scopes of service as well.
Well, we had today, a gentleman comes up here and saying, hey, can we have rent be used? They got a certain amount of time they can spend that, and they are asking for more money. And I'm just saying, I'm not questioning that they are being very productive and being very prudent with what they've gotten. I'm just questioning how much are they getting to start it off, because you got some programs out here, especially the peacemakers, they got $10,000 and they got to have it spent by a certain time. They got to have that not spent, but to show how they're using it, they're operating like it's a 1-year piece, 1-year stint. That's all. I think it's a little fuzzy around the outsides of it, and I'm just seeing a lot of money right here. We've only talked to 2 programs a day, and I'm looking at, based on what they're saying, they got $62,000 to spend in 2 years, and they spent practically, I guess, 1 year, and they've only spent 5.
And
so why do I think they're going to spend $2,000? But anyway, that's my thoughts on it.
And that's why I think I'll share that it's important to look at the scope of work, because I think what you'll see in the scope of work is that's exactly how they intended on using these dollars when they were awarded by the commission. But you don't know that if you're not looking at that scope of work.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for bringing that up, because that's one of the things that I've been puzzled by, is the fact that for those 2 years on certain, when the ARPA money for the gun violence intervention was given out, there were certain different amounts given, but they were large amounts, and as you said, $5,000 now. My concern is, as you trend down, and if you have not spent that money, will you just go out and just spend it because you want to spend up the money? Or how do we have checks and balances in there to make sure if you're off point, to give back the money?
Yeah, so there's...
If you find you haven't spent $15,000, do you get back the $15,000 before they go out and spend the $15,000?
Yeah, there's two ways that that's done. One of those is, again, there's a contract with each of these parties, and this is true for all of our ARPA dollars. There's a contract, and in that contract, it spells out in the scope of work what they're going to actually spend those dollars on. So in other words, what they're authorized to spend those dollars on.
Right.
That's all they can spend it on. So
Right.
if and that's one check, is they're not going to go out and just spend money to spend money because they can't. The contract does not permit that. The second check that we have is, as was mentioned, this is true again for all of the ARPA funds, is there are regular monthly reports that are required by each of the recipients, unless it was one time, because if it's a one-time funding, we only get one report. Small businesses, for example, we only got that one report. And part of the reason we need those is because it's actually then what our staff actually is required to submit to the Department of Treasury to demonstrate that we're implementing these programs the way that they're required. The other reason we get those is to do exactly what you all have talked about, which is if it becomes evident, and we had this actually with, I think it was one of our arts grant programs that we had, it actually became evident that we had exhausted everyone that was able to do the work that they could do, and we still had money left over. That allowed us to repurpose those dollars to another grant program. So yes, absolutely, if during those monthly checks it becomes apparent that they're not going to spend those dollars, then that would be a conversation with that recipient as to, okay, then we would repurpose those dollars inside that grant program. So those are the two checks that you have to be certain that folks don't just wait till the end, spend the money on something that's not covered under the contract.
Right, I was still focusing on what you said the scope of the work may be, such as if it is for training and salaries, for instance, and we still have $27,000, they could take that money and make a higher salary just to use the money versus looking and being prudent, as the mayor would say, and give the money back. Because that's part of, let's say, of their memorandum of understanding, scope is for training, for staff, for salaries.
Correct.
But does it break it down to what that salary should look like, or is that just part of the scope?
It has in the budget, it actually says
Okay.
what they can spend on the salaries as well as on benefits or whatever, or materials or supplies. All of the budgets have.
Right,
that
and that's what
level
I'm
of
saying,
detail.
and similar to what the mayor is saying, is that if they have $30,000 left, and just what you said, they could take that money and make sure it's spent on the training, the salaries, the supplies, or whatever, just to spend up the money versus turning back in the money when they may not need some additional supplies.
But I guess in
or what have
that
you.
case, they would be spending the money in accordance with the contract.
That's what I'm saying, because of what the contract says. So they're staying within the law, letter of the law, and what they're to spend the money on. But we're looking at what could be left over to be used somewhere
Yeah,
else.
I guess in that case, though, you're
Yeah.
sort of speculating that they're going to be fraudulent in their activities, which I would say would be of concern.
I disagree with that. I don't think she was alluding that.
I wasn't alluding to being fraud, no, I
Well,
was
you just,
not.
I mean, you indicated
No.
they would spend money.
No, I was
on-
just alluding to spending up the money.
Right, on things that
Yes.
they weren't
Well, no,
authorized to
not on
spend.
things, no, just because they had the money and they wanted to use the money versus returning the money, but they're using the money.
Right, and that's what I want to say. They can
Yeah.
only use the money for what they've been approved to use the money for.
And that's what we're saying. We're saying the same thing, but in a different way. Thank you.
Can I just say something, Mr. Mayor? Thank you. Mr. Cowell, I appreciate you sharing those contracts with us, because those, the mayor and Ms. Moon Reynolds, they have some legitimate questions, because we're looking at $400,000 between 13 organizations. That is a lot of money. And so it is helpful for us, because I don't mean, and I'm sure they don't mean to create a sense of frustration, but you know what we don't know. And it would be helpful for us to know that as well. And I do, you did, Mr. Cobb, give us the list of the organizations. We do have that. But what we don't have are the contracts and how the money should be spent, and the checks and balances, which you know are in place, and Mr. Cobb knows are in place, but I had no idea. I had no idea.
Yeah.
So, and that's helpful, and thank you. I mean, it's not to frustrate anybody, it's just to get clarification. So that shouldn't frustrate anybody. They should be glad to, to clarify with us, so that we know, and that we can say, this is what we're doing in our community for gun violence prevention. So it's just asking for some useful and helpful information, and I appreciate your willingness to
Yeah.
share that with us.
And certainly, those are those are public records as well. So anyone that wants to see any of those agreements certainly is able to do so. And I think in this case, we have been, as we do in some of our other grant programs, we tend to rely on the commissions or the advisory boards that you have appointed or selected to serve in that capacity, but all of that information certainly is available. And I guess a question that I would have for council is, do you want, well, my suggestion was is every time there's a group coming to do a presentation, we certainly could provide that. Do you actually want to just receive copies of those MOUs for everyone that's received a grant from the Gun Violence Prevention Commission?
It's only 13, and for the $4,000, it's 13, and I think for the $100,000, it's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So it's not that many, so that would be helpful,
Okay.
yes.
That would be helpful.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else got any questions?
Thank you.
So that is that briefing. We will now turn to our second briefing, and as Mark is getting set up, I'm going to kind of set the stage here and give you a little bit of context and background. We had actually anticipated this presentation being made by Chuck Dupree, who is our consultant with Downtown Economics, Inc. He, however, unfortunately let us know early this morning that he had had a medical emergency last night and therefore could not travel. So we're using his presentation. Certainly we have been involved, Mark has been involved and his staff in this process, but just wanted to explain why Mark instead of Chuck is here. And let me set, though, the context for this and then let Mark kind of move forward. So most of you know, over the course of a number of years and probably more than 2 comprehensive plans, there has been this emphasis on various names, village centers, neighborhood centers, complete neighborhoods, what have you, and the role in which they play within the successful implementation of our comprehensive plan. Those have been, we've used various techniques to try to further those objectives. Those have included removal of parking requirements in certain areas. They have included new or more innovative zoning opportunities in those areas to try to stimulate development, all the way into some of our incentive programs even have been able to, or we've been focused on those. That has in part resulted in certainly the ongoing stability of the South Roanoke or Crystal Springs Center as well as the Grandin Village Center, though I also want to highlight, certainly in the case of Grandin Village Center itself wasn't all that stable at one period of time, and certainly through a lot of private action as well as public policy support has become more stable with time. The only other that has really kind of emerged out of that approach really is the Wasena Center, and similarly, that emerged out of a set of private investments as well as public policies, but then that's been kind of it. So in conversation with council over the last couple of years, there was a desire to see if we could do more to actually see that section of the comprehensive plan furthered or have more success in those areas. And actually that was included in the current strategic plan that we're operating under, was to move further in that direction. This process started, there's dozens upon dozens of these centers identified in the comprehensive plan. And so the process started with staff actually going through every one of those and using those against a set of criteria to try to somewhat rank order those that appeared to have the majority of the assets that might actually allow us to move in those directions, down to those that seem to have the greatest challenges or the fewest of those opportunities or assets. And that was kind of step one, was to get us to that point where we could identify those that appeared to offer the most promise or those that might require the least amount of intervention. Key to that actually was current private investment in those areas that you'll see when we go through these. And that really exhausted what we at the staff level were able to do in moving this forward. So at that time we issued an RFP for some outside consulting assistance for someone that specializes in this area. And that was, there were several responses. Ultimately, Downtown Economics Incorporated was selected. This is a company that works very closely with DHDC as well as multiple Main Street programs across the state in really crafting these kinds of plans and the kinds of interventions that would help further these objectives. And that's the work that has been completed. We now have a draft plan. What we're doing today is similar to what Mark did last week or last month with the Economic Development Strategic Plan, which is we're giving you a briefing on the plan at this point. We'll then forward to you all and make available for public display as well the draft plan that will come this week. And then on December 19th, we will come back and actually ask for action on both of those plans. So that's kind of how this is flowing as we move through. I want to make one more distinction, then turn it over to Mark. There is actually a companion component of this which focuses specifically on Gainsborough. So there is a sort of neighborhood center plan being worked on for Gainsborough. It is being done separately because it's actually being funded through a National League of Cities grant that we received. And that is not going through this process yet because it requires some additional community engagement, probably looking at January or February when that one will come through. So I just didn't want there to be any confusion because there's a couple of things going on with that. So with that, I'm going to let Mark walk through the presentation. There may be a couple times that I interject in here, and then at the end, there may be a few last comments, and then we'll take any questions that you might have as well.
Great. Well, good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and I'm pleased to join you this afternoon to provide an overview on the Neighborhood Centers Plan. I had to jump in this morning. We've been working with our consultants, Chuck Dupree with Downtown Economics, LLC, since March of this year, and as Bob mentioned, he had an unexpected health issue arise and was unable to join us today, and he sends his regrets. So I jumped in and put together some notes, which luckily most of which Bob had covered already, so we can move on from there. So I'll take you through the plan. Again, this is not my work, so I'm going to be reading from some of it, and I apologize in advance for that. So basically, when we started this process, the city manager asked us to look at two distinct categories of neighborhoods: centers with vibrancy that could benefit from enhancement in physical infrastructure and private development, like those who are listed here, and then a second category of neighborhoods that are maybe not as far along, but could benefit from the investment of some kind, which would differ from place to place. So primarily the neighborhoods in that first category are listed here, and they are 11th Street Northwest, the West End, Melrose Avenue, and at 24th Street and 9th Street Southeast. So before starting its work, Downtown Economics looked at the three neighborhood centers that we labeled as mature, in that they had certain desirable aspects that make them destinations in their respective communities. And you can see those right here. That's Wasena, as Bob mentioned, Crystal Springs, and Grandin Village. So for Wasena, Downtown Economics noted that the presence of several small yet not insignificant things that help create a sense of place and community: benches, bicycle racks, awnings, tailored signage, and street trees. Some of these things were added by developers or business owners when they renovate or move into a new space. Personally, this is my neighborhood, and I can see these shops that are shown here from my house. And they didn't look like that a few years ago. When I would take my dog out for a walk, and my dog isn't that old, we would walk down that street and it would be just the two of us on a dark street. So it shows the power of investment, not just from the private side, but from the public side as well. You may recall that we, about 10 years ago, we sold the building that is now the Green Goat. We sold that for about $3,000 with the condition that they put God, that'd be nice, $300,000 of investment into it. It is thriving. It's in its 10th year and has done very well. That sort of was a companion to the things that Ed Walker had done over at the Ice House with the climbing gym and the tap room. And so that kind of started the kickoff, and then eventually the Garlands and other developers got involved, and what we see today in Wasena is a result of that. So for Crystal Springs, we see similar accoutrements in Crystal Springs: benches, landscaping, but also outdoor dining and trash receptacles, things like that. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to stop me. I'm just sort of moving through this quickly. I know y'all are tired and had a long day. So in Grandin, we see a slight variation on the form: historic buildings, varied architectural types, paving details, things like that. But again, there are commonalities: street trees, outdoor dining, ability to walk, things like that. For decades, the city has promoted the neighborhood centers as an important node in the network of economic activity. For the purposes of this study, the four areas that were chosen as potential centers to serve as test beds for this kind of revitalization, they were selected based on high potential for success, considering activity drivers like traffic, residential density, and amenities like parks. The existing fabric of buildings and infrastructure were also important factors. So the first one was 11th Street, which is located off Orange Avenue and nestled in the housing areas of Harrison and Gilmer. It's a 3-block corridor. 11th Street is uniquely positioned for a mixed-use development already, having both commercial and residential structures dotted throughout. As such, this corridor has the potential of being a neighborhood center catering to artists and entrepreneurs who would bring a hardy 24/7 good foot traffic element. The key to success would be to incentivize the relocation of the auto part and metal scrap yards within the subject area of interest. And so what they did there is provide a map. I apologize for this being a little bit out of order, but that's giving you the general area as to where the center is located. So other key recommendations, ground level public spaces and upper level mix of office and residential, renovations and facade improvements, pocket parks and public green spaces at the southeast corner of 11th Street in Mormon, a range of development opportunities, including chain pharmacies, up to 3 small independent restaurants, art studios, live workspaces, service businesses, and other things.
So, and I'll pause there for a second and interject, just so you all know, because you don't have yet, you will this week, you don't have benefit of seeing the draft plan. So alongside each of the graphics that Mark's going through with these, we asked the consultant to provide with us two additional things, and really the more important things. The ideas are great and they're important, but the way in which we can actually act on those ideas are even more important. So 2 things that you'll see in the draft plan include kind of the phasing of implementation. So he said, tell us what, you've given us 10 or 20 things that could revitalize this center or change it. Tell us what those key first couple of steps are, in their opinion. So you'll see that in the plan as well. So Mark already alluded to one of those here, which is they believe that really probably one of the key components in this particular center that we're talking about is actually to address those scrap yards, junk yards, if you will, that are in that area. Then they list other actions that could follow after that. So that's one key thing you'll see in the plan as well. The other that we asked them to do is give us an inventory, if you will, of various tools that could be used for that purpose. We know some of those, and we have some of those, whether those are facade grants or whether those are zoning. We have those. We wanted awareness of other tools that we might not be using currently. So when you see the plan, you'll see that alongside kind of the idea page. For the presentation piece, we're showing just kind of the idea page to give a sense of what's possible in each of these centers.
While you're on that, could I just ask real quickly, what's the potential time frame?
That's a good question, too, because there's 2 answers to that. One of those is this plan is set up to be a little bit different than our comprehensive plan. Comprehensive plan is thinking, hey, over the next 20 years, can we move some of these? These are intended to be a little bit shorter term, so I would look at a 5 to 7 year kind of time frame to be actually able to do some of the implementation of these. Now, if you look at Wasena and you think of the time it took for Wasena to turn from what it was to what it currently is, and that's an area that was experiencing an increase in incomes and some other things, you get a sense of what that takes in order for that to work through. So I would use that 5 to 7 year time frame that you should be able to see something change in it. It may be our investments first that take place, and then hopefully the private investments follow with that as well. But that's the time frame I would use. You actually approved in the current budget a small amount of seed money that I'll talk about at the end that will help some of these ideas get started.
Thank you.
And as you'll see later in the plan, Councilwoman Price, there are some additional things that the consultants recommend in terms of branding and some other things that they think would be helpful for these projects.
Just getting rid of that junk on 11th Street is a huge step in the right direction.
And it was really interesting to watch them walk around because we would talk to them when they got back. We didn't walk with them on most of these things because we didn't want anyone to see us walking around. But when they came back, you could see the excitement. I mean, this is what planners do. You have a planner running the organization, and it's amazing to see when they come back with and the things that they see, because they see the world very uniquely through what it can be. And so when they walked through there and they saw those car lots and the junk and the things like that, they push all that aside and they see what could be there. So.
Thank you. I did have a question, if I could, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to ask. And this deals with your key recommendations. Believe it or not, I read this emerging neighborhood city. Last night, I'm up reading it. Yes, I did. And I had a couple of questions because I'm just that kind of person. I looked at where you said 11th Street was located, and you mentioned the housing areas of Harrison and Gilmer, where, you know, where Harrison does not come up to 11th Street. And I'm just pointing that out.
Right.
That it is more along with Loudon Avenue and Mormon Road than it is with the Harrison area, and that is on your vision concepts, live work. I think you can go back where you at? You're going the wrong way.
I know, I'm trying to get to it.
Oh, you want to go from the front?
But I know what you're talking about, you're fine.
Yes, and that kind of, I just thought I would bring that when you said the 3-block corridor. And because Gilmer will continue, but Harrison does not. It stops at Fifth, you know, it stops at the fork in the road, right? And so I just wanted to see if that was
Right, that's
something that
correct. You
needed
are
to
right.
be
Yes, ma'am.
corrected.
That is
Since
something
you were
we'll point out
using
to them.
outside consultants to say, no, because others will bring that up.
Mm-hmm.
They say, no, that's not where we're at. And then when I looked at your key recommendations, I just wanted to get, I'm trying to get where you're at, and where you say the Pocket Park and public green space at the southeast corner of 11th and Mormon. I'm looking for the Pocket Park.
Yeah, so that,
where is
where they've identified,
Yes, I'm just trying to say, where's the park?
yeah, where they've identified a potential for a new park.
Okay.
Is what it's talking
Is
about.
that where the Reynolds place is, or where you're at when you're talking about your green space? Because you have Hamlin Curtis, and they've got
Right.
their parking lot, and then across you got the Hope Center. So I'm trying to see.
Yeah, they've actually identified,
They're saying-
the consultant actually
11th
identified
and
the
Mormon.
ability to repurpose actually pieces of that parking area that's associated with the funeral home. So that's an area.
Okay, that's what I wanted to find out, because I kept trying to think Pocket Park.
And that's where they are.
Oh, at the very end?
Yeah. And that's why I say that it's
Right.
important to recognize what they're doing is giving us ideas.
Right, and that's
And
fine.
these are
And that's what I
ideas.
mean when I was looking at 11th and Mormon.
Right.
I was at 11th and Mormon in my mind, like, where are you, you
Right.
know, in that southeast part? That helps
And
me.
these are just concepts, because I'm
Right,
sure Mr.
that's
Hamler
fine.
would be very interested in saying, oh, that's nice, don't
Yeah.
talk to me about this yet.
Yeah, because
but
I liked
we're
it,
still
I
working
liked
through
it, I liked that concept. But
Right.
then I kept thinking, where is it? Where is it? Lord, let it be Reynolds, you know, with all the
Right.
junk. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
No problem.
No.
Yeah, I was going to add to that. I mean, it could be that, for example, if one of their first recommendations is to figure out a way to help get rid of some of the junk that's there, it may very well be that that's where you end up putting a pocket park. So I
Right.
wouldn't get, and we're going to have to make sure that folks understand this when we push the plan out, is I wouldn't get too concerned about the specific locations of things as much as the idea.
Right, but I was just, like I said, I was just reading that, because I did like your range of development opportunities. That did excite me when I saw all the possibilities for in that area in 11th Street. It was like bringing it back from the days once upon a time where there were a lot of businesses over there in that corridor.
Well, you know, I think this is one of these things, sort of like, you know, all politics is local, these kind of descriptions are local as well.
Right.
So even if they miss that on something, folks who are here and looking at this plan, they're going to notice. So thank you for pointing that out.
Right, but the vision is there, and I like that. Thank you.
So the next one we had identified was West End, and despite the numerous patches of non-public and vacant parcels, they see a cohesive atmosphere throughout the corridor. Basically, they're talking about, given the fact that there's so much proximity to things that are the Roanoke River and Black Dog Salvage and community gardens, that this is the kind of neighborhood that could attract sort of a lifestyles, goods, and services provider to further expand opportunities for individuals that are already consuming products and experiencing and experiences in the vicinity. I mean, it's a close walk to so many different things that are already so lively. So this is basically where they've identified as that as the West End neighborhood, and is everybody okay with that? Move on to the key recommendations. Okay. So the key recommendations that they have is use existing density, branding, and proximity to local attractions to develop neighborhood center based on cultural commerce, lifestyle, recreation. A catalytic mixed-use development with ground floor public spaces and upper level offices and residential renovation, conservation, and adaptive reuse of opportunities, and potential business opportunities, including cafes and restaurants with outdoor and rooftop dining, and there's a whole list of other things there as well.
And of course, in this case, the good news is twofold, which is one, since the West End area was one of our previous target areas, there's already some existing investment, some of the remnants left from those investments that were made in terms of streetscape and those types of things. Additionally, because of some of the ARPA dollars that you provided to LEAP to address some of the food access issues, of course, you now have LEAP's new hub recently, part of it recently completed and the rest about to open. So some of these key recommendations in this area are actually underway and in many cases about to be implemented. So there are some building blocks that are starting to occur already in this area.
And when you talk about the West End area, what are your 100 blocks that you're referring to? I'm just trying to get a visual of where you're at.
Yeah, so if you think of where the West End Center is currently, and it's at, right at that
13th Street.
Yeah, so right at that intersection at Patterson and is 13th across, yeah.
Okay.
So that's where you are, is right there at that
Right, and then moving toward Memorial, where
Yes,
you mentioned
yes.
the Black Dog Savage
Yes.
and all that.
Correct,
Okay,
yep.
I was just trying to get
That's
with you.
Does
Thank
anybody
you.
else have any other questions before we move on? Okay. So the next is identified as Melrose Avenue, and the far-reaching revitalization, residential revitalization programming in the district serves to underscore the need for additional retailing. And this is, I believe, another area that has already received significant resources. Bob, if I'm correct, it's kind of already been through the...
Yeah, I guess, again, good news here with this, if you want to turn to the recommendations, is at the time that Chuck and his team were working on this, we were, of course, everyone was aware that part of our target area was to focus on a grocer and some other activities. And of course, with the ARPA funding and the commitment from Goodwill, you're now getting that hub constructed there at Northwest. So again, there'll be, and in addition to that, of course, we've concluded the streetscape work on Melrose as well. So there are already some of these recommendations that have already been put in place, even since they were beginning to work on the draft of the plan, and certainly will benefit, I think, the ability to move this section of the plan a little bit faster than some of the other sections.
Right, and that middle recommendation, the recommendation that Bob refers to in terms of a grocery store, if you look at the middle, it says, continuing redeveloping and enhancing 24th Street from Melrose to Salem Turnpike, Loudon Avenue, including attraction of a 12 to 15,000 square foot grocery store. So that is one of the things that they had when they started this process that's already come to fruition. The other recommendations that they have is create a gateway for the neighborhood, streetscape improvements, renovation and redevelopment of parcels along Melrose and Forest Park Boulevard.
Yes, the one you mentioned with the renovate or redevelop the parcels at Melrose and Forest Park, is that the strip mall that you all are referring to on Melrose and Forest Park Boulevard?
That would be...
At the corner at the light?
Right, is that...
Yes, that's...
Across from the school.
Yes, across from
Yes,
Forest
ma'am.
Park.
Yes, that's correct, and
The
that
strip
was...
mall and the vacant, next, the corner, from the corner of Lafayette where Bill White's CPA on to the Melrose, to Forest Park.
Yeah, and of course, and you all know in that area, there are already there's some
Right, that's
businesses
what what
that
I
are
mean,
actually
to renovate or
starting.
redevelop,
So,
yes.
yeah.
Because there are still some shops
Yes,
and
ma'am.
things already there. And the vacant buildings along the sidewalk, there used to be a medical, if you recall back when, there used to be a medical
went to the
clinic.
doctor.
Yes, medical clinic and a pharmacy.
And it was a pharmacy.
There you go, yes. That's why I mean, that area there,
That's- That whole area.
yeah, which could be, definitely be revitalized. Thank you.
So the fourth neighborhood that they identified was 9th Street, and the vision concept they had there was personal service and community care. The portion of 9th Street southeast between Jameson and Highland Avenue is central to the community. It's linked to the residential neighborhoods on the south and on the commercial institutional sections running north to Tazewell Avenue. Some of the existing businesses in this 3-block area include CVS, Carter Bank and Trust, some thrift and pawn shops, a mattress store, and they're best described as service providers for the fulfillment of needs of individual customers, moreover than businesses.
And again, kind of the good news here with this piece is this is a part of our, or in the vicinity of our target area. So right now, this is an area we're working in the city. Also, in this part of the city, we have identified, you all have identified some of our ARPA dollars to go into this area. So we have a little bit more financial resources we can put into this plan. Also, as you know, in this same area, the Presbyterian Community Center has already indicated their efforts at actually expanding their footprint there. So there's some things moving in this that work well to kind of help sort of anchor this as one of those neighborhood centers.
So the key recommendations that they have listed for 9th Street is to continue to cultivate personal care and community care services, facade improvements. That is something we hear quite often from that community. A portion of our enterprise zone under which the facade program falls is in Southeast, but they'd like to see an expanded footprint of that. This actually calls for the same sort of thing. Create parking areas similar to Crystal Springs, redevelop properties at the intersection of 9th and Jamison. They see potential business opportunities as shoe repair, alterations, consignments, gift shops, things like that. Anybody have any questions on that part?
And on this piece, and if you want, Mark, I'll do the next couple of slides if you'll just move. So one of the other things that we asked of the consultant was, and you'll see this in just a second, obviously, if everything was in place in these areas in terms of the localized economy, they would be centers already. I mean, obviously, we've used as kind of those prototypes the Grandin, Crystal Springs, and to some degree Wasena. So there are certain characteristics that have allowed them to succeed and certain interventions that the city and others have put in place to further their success. So one of the things we wanted the consultant to share with us is give us what the current state of the economy is in these areas. That helps us kind of fine-tune or refine the interventions by understanding the differences. And so the slide that Mark just put up really starts to kind of show this. So if you look at the first three centers are the ones that we use as kind of the prototype. So you start looking at, I'll just use Grandin Court and Crystal Springs. One of the key advantages they have is the number of people. So there's 6,000 people living within proximity, easy proximity of those centers. When you look at, for example, 11th Street in West End, you have half that population. So that's going to be one of those challenges. But if you look at Melrose, you've got significantly more. You've got 16,000 people living in that same area. Similarly, they looked at...
Excuse me, when you mentioned that, not to cut you off, but because when you hit the Melrose Avenue, is that including where you're saying the population, does that include Lansdowne?
It does, yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
And when you look at, and you'll see that reflected in the number of households, you see a lot of households added in those areas. Skip all the way down then probably to the most significant, which is median household income. Obviously, these centers are centers of commerce, so people need to have money to spend. And so when you look at the money that's available in Grandin Court, Crystal Springs, and Wasena, you can see pretty clearly why they are successful centers. But I will say, if I look at Melrose again, and even though that income is significantly lower, when you look at that, that's a household income. But remember, there are 3 times the number of households in Melrose than there are at Grandin or Crystal Springs. So the purchasing power might still be there. It may just not be an individual individual households. It's in the accumulation of those households. But this was a part of, and you'll see the next couple of slides, this was a part of what we asked them to do to kind of share with us and show us some of those economic challenges.
And when you mentioned the purchasing power of Melrose, again, that will include what those are able to earn from the public housing, which
Correct.
is also
Correct.
being incorporated, which gives you that number.
Yes, it will capture everyone, all of those, based off of the census data. It's capturing all of that from that live within that area, yes.
Would the number be higher if we did not have the housing in there and we were just looking at the community that's around it, the residences?
It could be per household. It could be.
That's
yes.
what I mean. It seems like it's just kind of,
It's got to make an impact.
it just seems like it is.
Yeah, no, it could be.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Mark, can you tell me again what that entails, the Melrose area? Because if you go to Lansdowne, are you considering Shenandoah Village, which is right behind it?
Yeah, and what I'll do,
Because that's a lot of that's
and I'm going to have to look
apartment
at, I'll have to look
complex,
at their
too.
plan to see, because what they did is they based it off of a, kind of an area where they said
Yeah,
that
I'm
folks
wondering
would
what that
likely come
area
from.
is now, because these numbers are interesting.
Yeah, and that's in the actual plan. It'll
Oh,
show you
okay.
exactly the area that they pulled from.
Oh, okay.
If that's okay, Ms. Whiteboy, we can come back to you.
Yeah,
with
no, I
clarification
was
on
just
that.
curious, because those are some large numbers. I'm just wondering where you're getting that population. And Lansdowne makes sense, but then right next to it, you have Shenandoah Village, which is also pretty dense.
Typically, what they'll do, and I don't know in this case if they did, what they'll do is they'll identify something like, say, a 15-minute walk radius, so
okay.
they'll go to the center and then actually spread out from there.
And it's right there, it's right there, it's right in the corner. So I'd be, yeah, Mark, that would be really.
Yeah, we can get some clarification from you on that.
Okay.
The next piece that we asked them to do in these same areas was give us additional information around the business side of it. So the first one dealt with the households and the population that was there. This one is actually identifying the businesses. And again, all this is drawn from census information and others as well. So, interestingly, when you look at some of these would be kind of small businesses, home-based businesses might be captured in this, all of those kinds of things. But it also helps identify the number of employees in the districts, which are also important because much like households, employees are potential customers in these areas as well. I'll use Crystal Springs as a great example of that. And of course, in the Crystal Springs case, you're only capturing, again, within a close-in area. So you're certainly capturing those banks, you're capturing the doctor's offices, but you're not necessarily capturing the hospital and all of the folks that work there, even though certainly folks are actually using Crystal Springs. And further that by the trolley connection. The trolley connection actually links all of the residents in downtown to those areas in Crystal Springs as well. So this was, again, another way in which it helped us kind of look at each of these areas to understand what the current conditions are, both in those prototypical centers and then also in the centers that we're trying to figure out what types of interventions might be appropriate and necessary. And then the very last item that they looked at was actually this. So there's this approach that is uses proprietary information that is, in this case, Tapestry. There's a couple different companies that do this, and what they do is they use a whole collection of different resources. That can be census information, they use information from credit card companies, a whole host of other things. And what they do is they try to actually segment populations in areas into certain categories that actually help refine the kinds of market opportunities that may or may not exist in those areas. This information is used pretty regularly by retailers as well as site selectors to help understand where there might be a market for the kinds of products they sell. Really simple example I can give to you is if you are in a rural area, there's a certain, the population can be segmented in a way very different from an urban area. So if you're in a rural area, you may very well feel that based on that segmentation, selling farming implements, for example, would work, whereas it would not work in an urban center because that segment of the population with those characteristics just don't exist in those areas. So that's one of the tools that they use in this case. Again, if you look at the divisions where they've looked at the Grandin, Crystal Springs, and Wasena, you can actually see a fairly stark difference between the segmentation with the target neighborhoods that we focused on with the interventions. What that is essentially saying is two things, I think. One is you're not going to develop, or these centers that we're talking about are not going to develop in the same way with the same offerings as what you would find in Grandin or in Crystal Springs or the others. So this is not about replicating what's in Grandin or what's in Crystal Springs or what's in Wasena. This is about actually finding what will work in those neighborhoods and furthering those efforts. And that's what this really gets down to. So whereas a Bloom restaurant would work in Wasena, it may not likely work in these areas. However, something like the Screaming Vegan that's over in the area across from the school that was talked about earlier, obviously does. It has a market segment that it's actually attracting. So that's what this is intended to do, is to also help refine as we start to think about interventions, that we're not going after land uses or business activities that likely don't have a chance of succeeding in these areas. So that's part one of this. Part two of this is, I think some of what with Grandin, Crystal Spring, and Wasena is also after the fact. So these are now fully functioning, mature centers. When they first started, they too could not support a Bloom or some of these other things, that they actually have matured into supporting some of these activities, and that has changed over time. So I think that's part of what this is showing us in both of those ways.
Bob, before we move on, there's just a couple of categories I think people may want to get some clarification on. When you see the term Emerald City, that's referring to younger, more mobile residents who kind of live in lower density neighborhoods, about 50% have college degrees and have incomes that are close to the national median. When you look at family foundations, they tend to use that as people who are really bolstered by family and faith, and they tend to be the cornerstones of those communities. They tend to have older children at home, and the neighborhoods tend to be stable with a little household growth over time. Hometown heritage, they have residents tend to live in older houses and work in the service industry or manufacturer or retail trades, and renters represent about 3/5 of the households. City commons, they tend to be among younger markets, single parent or single person households, and the occupations tend to be office or administrative support. And old and newcomers are neighborhoods and transitions that are populated by people starting careers or ending. These are not my definitions, these are the things that are here. Well, when I read through the tapestry as well, I didn't know what these were, so I dug out the terms.
And there's a lot of other ones as well that just aren't present here in our community at all. So.
Thank you for that, going through that clarification. Bob, I have to comment on what you just went through as far as giving the examples of what may work in one area is not necessarily going to survive in another. But at the same time, I cannot sit here and not comment on, because this is my neighborhood, this is where I live. And one of my daughters made a comment to me not that long ago. She said, "Mom, how many more Family Dollars can we get in the radius on Melrose, and also the vape and tobacco stores?" It's like one every block going up and down Melrose. Those to me send a very clear signal to the residents, all of us. And I would like to say that yes, we're kind of solid middle class residents, but when you see that the density of those kinds of businesses continually coming into what I'm sure is described in my neighborhood as lower economic grouping. So I just have to make that comment, because this I think is a wonderful step in the right direction to try to make our neighborhoods more equitable. And what Bob just described, just triggered me because I don't know how you control not having a Family Dollar every other block, and definitely those vaping and tobacco and the stores that all they sell is alcohol.
Yeah. They're
like every block.
And I think that the key component of that, or a message of that, is that what those businesses have identified is there is indeed business opportunity in these neighborhoods. They have defined that pretty narrowly. Basically, they know they can make money, so they've gone to those neighborhoods. What I think part of the effort of this plan and ultimately the implementation is there are other activities that also are possible in those areas, but they don't necessarily, that's not the low-hanging fruit. That's not the easy money, if you will, and that's why these interventions become necessary, because you're not likely to get some of those other businesses to invest in those areas because they're not willing to take either the risk that's necessary, or they just they aren't able to tackle the market that exists quite as easily as some of those others. So exactly what you've described is what you will receive in those neighborhoods without some kind of intervention to support other activities.
And I appreciate the fact that you're recognizing this is a challenge, but at the same time, if you don't make some kind of inroads and acknowledge what is actually happening, there can't be any change. So I just want to say thank you. And to my colleagues, yes, I will be keeping eyes. Thank you.
Because that also brings to mind what Ms. Price was saying when we talked about the tobacco and the vapor. we're finally seeing the pay loan places are finally shutting down. I guess the money is no longer there in the community that benefit them.
There's been more legislation.
Yes, right, that has controlled that.
how
But
that
I
works,
did
though.
want to go back over to your neighborhood business overview, and this kind of still reigns in with what Ms. Price was saying. I was looking at your total businesses in the district, and I'm just, I look at 376 in the Melrose area, and I'm going, we do? Where are they? That kind of thing, as well as the employees, Yeah, I mean, really, I did. I looked at that, and I was like, okay, even down to the retail trade, I guess the parentheses is the number. Is it 76 that they're saying retail trade businesses in the district?
Yes, I believe that's what
Just looking at all of that, I was like, okay, where are they at?
Well,
Even on
we can
11th
get further
Street.
clarification from them on that as
Yes,
well.
I mean, really, I was just curious. Even on 11th Street, in that district,
As far as actual business.
actual businesses within that radius that you all gave, I'm trying to come up with that 119, as well as the 1,200 employees in that district. So that sort of thing. So I would like to see that.
We can
if I
get the
could.
contact.
Yes.
A little bit of the context is lost with having me deliver it as opposed to.
I know. That's why I'm just putting it out there so that you can bring that information back from where they got it.
This is enlightening.
It is. Like I said, I stayed up and read it. I wanted to know. And it didn't make me go to sleep. I was into it. Yeah.
If you're done, Mark, I just have a couple of questions. That information would certainly be helpful if it's okay, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. I know you're going to get that, because we do need some context, because that is a lot of businesses. So we just need to know the areas, what the
No, I think that's
parameters are.
perfectly reasonable. We can get that for you.
And I just want to say thank you to Mr. Cowell and to all of you, because, the city centers have been in the comprehensive plan for decades. And I even said to you, Bob, you may not remember in 2019, why do we keep putting it in there if we're not going to do something with it? And it looks like we have. We're taking the steps to move forward and to actually try to create these neighborhood centers that we've talked about for decades. I can also see why, with the census and this information, why no one is developing into Melrose, because the census just doesn't provide the numbers that would, make it suitable with the income levels. I mean, even when you look at the in-style and urban chic, nobody, there's nothing there. And that's unfortunate, and that's also why I want to say thank you, Mr. Cowell, for recognizing that, they may not check all the boxes and meet all the criteria. That's why we have to, I guess, put some extra efforts, I guess, into those areas, because the median income is not there. It says there are a lot of businesses there. I don't know where they are, but there's a lot of things, there's a lot of boxes that are, or check marks that are missing for those areas, in particular 11th Street, 9th Street, Melrose Avenue. So I appreciate the fact that we're willing to put a little bit more time, money, and effort into those areas, because they don't have the resources that the other centers have or already have.
And I think I'd also say that, because I wouldn't necessarily, at this moment, it is extra, but I wouldn't necessarily characterize it as anything extra. With the exception of Crystal Springs, every one of our activity centers or neighborhood centers have benefited from direct intervention by the city at some point. So if you think of downtown, for example, there certainly have been investments made in public investments made in downtown that facilitated the the private investments that took place. No different in Wasena. The River House was kind of one of the first things that started there, the Ice House started there, and that was definitely involving incentives from the city to stimulate that. There were there's multiple items of streetscape projects that went on. There were public dollars that went into the Grandin Theater to try to stabilize it, as well as private dollars. So I don't want to leave the impression that we're expecting to do anything
different. We've already set a precedent,
We're just
right,
now
with the other-
turning,
right.
we're turning our attention to these areas, and a recognition that there are assets in these areas. There are also challenges, and we just got to pick apart those two and figure out how best to support the assets that exist and how to overcome the liabilities. No different than any of the other centers, though the challenge may be greater in some of these. Again, with the exception of Crystal Springs, left exclusively to the market, those centers would not have developed in Wasena or in Grandin, and so this is just continuing into other
Well,
areas
that's
of the city.
excellent. I appreciate you all recognizing the challenges and like you said, there's already been a precedent set with the others that we've gone into and to help jumpstart. So anyway, I just wanted to add that comment. Thank you.
So just a couple more slides and we can give you all a bit of a break. For economic strategies, there are two that I think are of particular interest here. The retention of a community engagement firm that can take a phased, and I think this kind of ties into what you were talking about in terms of benchmarking and keeping an eye on these things as they go. They recommend having a firm that can take a phased engagement approach that seeks more in-depth input from neighborhood stakeholders and benchmarks over time. They also specify that the firm should have experience with diverse constituencies, that they can understand how to work with these communities and what benchmarks you'd be able to use to be able to accurately account the information you're looking for. So the other one that they also have is branding. To make a key placemaking effort that can draw out and promote the unique qualities of each neighborhood. Each one of these is very different. We've heard quite a bit from the folks over in Gainsborough about the plan we're working on over there, and they are always quick to point out in every single conversation, we understand the neighborhood you're using as an example, but our neighborhood is unique. And so something like that, the branding could really pull out the unique things from those different neighborhoods and help them kind of bring those to the forefront and letting people can see them. Bob, did you have anything you want to add?
The only thing I'll add here as well is when these draft, just so you all are aware, when these draft ideas started emerging from the plan, I also assembled a group of folks that have made investments, private investments in the other centers. So think of folks like Lucas Thornton, Ed Walker, some of the others, John Garland, that have made investments in these areas and are continuing to make investments, and kind of talked through some of these recommendations with them, and that has helped us kind of refine those pieces. So the only reason I mention that is because we've tried to make these as grounded in some kind of reality as is practical, because we know that it's going to require action on our part to intervene, and we want to make those interventions as sort of surgical as they can be.
Mark and Bob, you might be able to address this too. How does all of this intersect with zoning and reviewing zoning and potential zoning matters that may come to us or that we could be proactive in terms of creative zoning, so that doesn't become a barrier?
I see what you're saying, yeah.
When we get to this point?
Yeah, and that is a part of what will need to be looked at. Is one of the items that they've identified in each of these is to ensure that there aren't any zoning barriers in place. Chris and his folks have worked long to remove those as many ways as they can. But again, those were key to downtown. Once we removed in downtown the requirement for mandatory minimum parking as well as allowing mixed use by right in some of those areas, that immediately allowed opportunities to occur. It would be inappropriate to apply the downtown standards into these centers, but we need to be looking at that exact same issue with those to find out if there are zoning impediments, if there are any of those that exist as well.
That's a good question, Mr. Cobb, because Ms. Sanchez-Jones and I took, you might have been in that, Ms. Moon Reynolds, when we were talking about affordable housing, how they lifted some of the zoning, which helped to expand affordable housing. So that concept is really a good concept and could be applied, I guess, as far as businesses or housing. So.
I mean, and we don't have this here, but there was a point in time that a lot of these kinds of centers languished because communities had zoning regulations that wouldn't allow a mixed-use building to be there. So nope, it's got to be, it's either got to be retail or it's got to be residential, and mixed use is what it historically was. We don't have that issue because our zoning has permitted that. Compounding that was that a lot of banks would not lend on those kinds of mixed-use buildings. A lot of that has been eliminated as well, and now allowing it. But yes, I mean, that has to be a piece of what we're looking at also.
Yeah, and be proactive, like this, like we were saying, be proactive and get rid of some of those restrictions so that, it's a little bit more friendly and easier to go into. But anyway, thank you.
And then I think at the end, with this list of incentives,
Kind of
so.
a kitchen sink of
Yeah.
incentives that are possible. Everything's thrown in there.
Everything's like, here's whatever, here you are.
Yeah, he did what we asked, which was give us the list of, there's even more than
What
than
is
missing.
You said there's even more than that?
Yeah, when you see the plan, you'll see there's even more, which is good, because we want to be certain we're not missing any of those
Exactly,
opportunities.
exactly.
So I think, well, first I want to thank Mark and his team, and Chuck and his team. They've done a great job. Our planning folks have been involved in this, our transportation folks have been involved in this, so there's been a lot of staff work combined with the consultant work with this. You all approved in this year's budget money to do this study and also a limited. I think in total, we had $100,000 to do the consulting work as well as the beginning kind of seed money. So one of the things we'll be doing is kind of teasing out, are there some low-cost things that we can do to start implementing this plan, and then start building kind of the future expenditures that are appropriate or necessary. And it's not all going to be money, some of it's policy, as we just talked about, like zoning. So we'll start building off of that. As mentioned, you all will receive probably tomorrow a draft copy of the plan. That will be placed out on our website as well as at the libraries, just like we did with the Economic Development Strategic Plan. We'll do a kind of general media release so folks know that it's out there, that they can view it, and then we will come back at your next council meeting looking for adoption of this plan so we can begin implementing it. If in the interim you think of any questions, obviously let Mark or myself know, and we can be happy to answer those, and we'll certainly gather some of the items that you've already requested here as well.
All right, thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, good job.
All right,
that,
we now,
that concludes the briefings, so.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, items recommended for action A, which is George Mason University's coalition to enhance the capacity of policing mental health problems in Virginia. There's a resolution.
Move the resolution. Second.
Madam Clerk, please read the title paragraph.
A resolution authorizing acceptance of a grant from George Mason University to the City of Roanoke Police Department, and authorizing execution of any required documentation on behalf of the city.
All right, is there any discussion? Members of the council? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor White Boyd.
Aye.
Mr. Cobb. Ms. Moon Reynolds.
Aye.
Ms. Price.
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez Jones.
Aye.
Mayor Lee.
Aye, and the resolution passes. Thank you. There's a budget ordinance.
Move the budget ordinance.
Second.
Madam Clerk, please read the title paragraph.
An ordinance to appropriate funding from George Mason University through the 2022 Bureau of Justice Assistance Brine Discretionary Community Project Funding Brine Discretionary Grants Program, amending and reordaining certain sections of the 2022-2023 grant fund appropriations, and dispensing with the second reading by title of this ordinance.
All right, any discussion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor White Boyd.
Aye.
Mr. Cobb. Aye. Ms. Moon Reynolds.
Aye.
Ms. Price.
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez Jones. And Mayor Lee.
Aye, and the budget ordinance passes. Thank you. Item B is an amendment number 3 to contract with Freedom First Enterprises to provide all equipment, materials, goods, labor, and services necessary for providing one-on-one financial counseling services. There's a resolution.
Move the resolution.
Is there a second?
Your voice down here.
That voice, you need to talk in the mic. You got a mic down there? Madam Clerk, please read the title paragraph.
A resolution authorizing the city manager or his designee to execute Amendment Number 3 to the city's contract with Freedom First Enterprises to provide all equipment, materials, goods, labor, and services necessary for providing one-on-one financial counseling services in a not-to-exceed total amount of $377,986 through March 15th, 2023.
What, any discussion? Members of council? Ms.
I
Moon
don't want
Reynolds?
to prolong the meeting, but I do have a question. Bob, could you tell us, with this contract, when does this contract expire?
So this is actually the third amendment to it, and I think, Brandon, do we have?
Current contract says March 15, 2023.
So that is.
And
that
then it would
is,
be put, it would be put, an RFP would be put out for any other financial institution?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
And I wanted to make sure everybody kind of understood what this one is. So thank you for the question with it. So as you all know, we started up a financial empowerment center. This is the financial counseling that is offered to not only our residents, but actually residents for the entire region, where they receive professional one-on-one financial counseling at no additional cost. In order to do so, we have secured a collection of grants. So those grants have come from Cities for Financial Empowerment Fund, which was affiliated in part with Bloomberg Philanthropies, but others as well. We've also received several times a grant from Carillion Clinic to assist us in this. And the RFP we actually issued that Freedom First was the recipient of the award actually requires them to actually contribute to the cost of this. So the cost that you're seeing is partly a cost provided by the grants that are referred to, but also Freedom First is obligated to bring some of their own dollars into this piece, which is an unusual RFP, but they were more than happy to step up and do that work. That will be one of the things we'll have to evaluate in the next RFP to see if we can continue to sustain that. And then, of course, at some point, fortunately, it's lasted longer than we anticipated, but at some point, the grants all end, and then we'll roll more of this over into other more sustainable resources as we move forward. We've kind of chipped away at that as well. And then the last thing I wanted to say was I wanted to acknowledge Brandon McGinley's work on what he's been doing with this, because he manages this program for us along with the Bank On program. And we're going to have Brandon come back at an upcoming meeting. It's been a while since he's been back here to update you all on the success that we're realizing with the FEC, and certainly wanted to give him that opportunity at one of the upcoming meetings.
That'd be good, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Madam Clerk, we're ready to call the roll.
Vice Mayor White Boyd.
Aye.
Mr. Cobb.
Aye.
Ms. Moon Reynolds.
Aye.
Ms. Price.
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez Jones.
Aye.
And Mayor Lee.
Aye, and the resolution passes. Item C is the acceptance of FY 2022-2023 United Way funding for the Bank on Roanoke Valley program. There's a resolution.
Move the resolution.
Second.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
I'll read the resolution.
Read the title paragraph.
Yes. A resolution authorizing the acceptance of funding by the City of Roanoke from the United Way of Roanoke Valley for program management and activities on the Bank on Roanoke Valley program, authorizing the city manager or his designee to execute any documents necessary to receive such funding and to take such further actions and execute such other documents as may be necessary to obtain, accept, implement, administer, and use such funds.
All right, any discussion among council?
Mayor, if I may, just quickly explain that this program, the Bank On program, has long been a collaboration between our local financial institutions and United Way. Basically, the local financial institutions pay to support the Bank On program, and United Way for years actually managed that program. When we started up the Financial Empowerment Center, they decided it made sense, and we concurred, for us to actually manage the program on their behalf. So the dollars that are talked about here are still raised from our financial partners. They are donated to United Way. United Way then in turn contracts with us. And again, this is a program that Brandon manages alongside the Financial Empowerment Center. The idea being that folks' entire financial opportunities are managed under one roof. So folks that are trying to secure their first bank account, all the way up through fairly sophisticated financial counseling, have one place to go for this. So that's the reason for this. And I think this is maybe the third year that we've been in this agreement with United Way. Thank you.
All right, any further discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor White Boyd.
Aye.
Mr. Cobb. Aye. Ms. Moon Reynolds.
Aye.
Ms. Price.
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez Jones.
Aye.
And Mayor Lee.
Aye, and the resolution passes. There's a budget ordinance.
Move the budget ordinance. Second.
Madam Clerk, read the title paragraph, please.
An ordinance to appropriate funding from the United Way of Roanoke Valley to transition program management from Bank on Roanoke Valley to the city to improve the financial stability of low to moderate income residents, amending and reordaining certain sections of the 2022-2023 grant fund appropriations, and dispensing with the second reading by title of this ordinance.
Thank you. Any discussion among council? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor White Boyd. Aye. Mr. Cobb. Aye. Ms. Moon Reynolds.
Aye.
Ms. Price. Aye. Ms. Sanchez Jones.
Aye.
And Mayor Lee.
Aye, and the budget ordinance passes. Item D is approval of Title IV Coordinator designation. There's a resolution.
Move the resolution.
Second.
Madam Clerk, would you read the title paragraph, please?
A resolution approving the Director of Human Resources as the Title VI Coordinator for
Title
the City of Roanoke, Virginia, to coordinate and implement the City of Roanoke's Title VI plans and strategies.
All right, any discussion?
Mayor, if you could, may I ask if the manager could share some additional information about this Title VI?
Sure. So this is fairly straightforward in that part of VDOT, Virginia Department of Transportation's responsibility, because they in turn receive funding from the Federal Highway Administration, is to ensure that their dollars are spent by local agencies without discrimination. And a piece of that is they regularly audit for those. During one of these audits, they made the determination that we needed to take some of these additional steps. One of those is naming our Human Resources Director, as that Title VI the coordinator with it as well. So it doesn't change any of our practices. It just adds another layer of accountability associated with making certain that we're expending those state and federal dollars on transportation in accordance with federal law regarding any kind of discrimination.
All right, is that it?
Yes, that's it.
All right, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor White Boyd. Aye. Mr. Cobb. Aye. Ms. Moon Reynolds.
Aye.
Ms. Price.
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez Jones.
Aye.
And Mayor Lee.
Aye, and the resolution passes. All right, I'm pleased to recognize the city manager for any comments that he'd like to make.
I have one only very brief comment, which each of you, I believe, are already aware of this, but I wanted to make sure that we talked, or I mentioned it, and set the stage for it. So you all know that we've been engaged, and I've been engaged, and others, in a conversation with the family of Estelle McCadden and the desire to actually acknowledge the contributions that she made in this community. We have arrived in conversation with family and also with the Melrose Rugby Neighborhood Foundation looking at the renaming of Kennedy Park. And so at a subsequent meeting, we'll have that item for. We'll coordinate that with the family to be certain that the family is able to attend. So I don't know if that will be at your next December meeting or one of the January meetings. As soon as we coordinate with the family, we'll know for certain. But wanted to just sort of update you on that, and thank you, because a number of you were involved in those conversations with the family members as well as the neighborhood. And I think we have arrived at something that will do Ms. McCadden proud for her contributions. And again, more information coming forward. And
Thank you for that, yes.
thank you. And Mayor, that is the only additional report I have, so thank you.
Bob, when will we, it brings up something else, because I know we had talked a little bit about Eureka Park. What's the timeline for that being completed?
For the park itself, so right now, we're beginning design on the recreation center. And so that, matter of fact, I think it's tomorrow, actually, is the community forum on the design piece of it. So we've got several months of design first associated with that. And then, of course, after the design is approved, we'll bid it out for construction. But basically, since we're using ARPA dollars, that construction has to be under contract by the end of 2024 with it. But somewhere as we near, probably 60% design, we'll have a briefing with council and be able to share what's coming out of that discussion, and then also kind of the new timeline at that point.
All right. Thank you. City Attorney, none? I don't have anything. Well, okay. 8 is reports of committees, none. 9 is unfinished business, none. 10 is introduction and consideration of ordinances and resolutions, none. Item number 11 is motion and miscellaneous business. Inquiries or comments by the mayor and/or members of council. All right.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to let the city manager know that I will be submitting a formal recommendation from the trust committee, for the priority trust under policy 2, lead the community in healing. There was a proposal submitted at the public hearing to rename the Richard E. Poff building to the Reuben E. Lawson building. And of course, you know, the only thing that we could do is a resolution, but I will be submitting that to you as a formal recommendation from the trust committee. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Are there any other comments?
Yes, sir, I do.
All right.
Last one, okay. You could tell, as I said last night, I wasn't doing anything but reading. You'd think I would have been in bed, but I wasn't. I saw several things in the Roanoke Tribune that caught my eye that I thought was worth sharing, and one was the Loudon Avenue tree planting. The One Valley Incorporated, a local nonprofit in the northwest Roanoke that operates the Carver Community Garden at 6th and Loudon Avenue, now in cooperation with Northwest Neighborhood Environmental Organization, which is NNEO. One Valley arranged with the Urban Forestry Division of the Roanoke Parks and Recreation Department to utilize 16 surplus trees that was left over from another project, mostly dogwoods. And they were planted along Loudon Avenue between 5th and 9th Street 2 weeks ago. There was 21 volunteers that was organized by One Valley and the Roanoke Tree Stewards. Planted the trees in the city right-of-way along with the streets between the sidewalk and the curb. Hopefully, this effort is just the first step of many to bring many trees to the area to address the lack of sufficient tree canopies to minimize the urban effect of higher temperatures that we endure during the summer, that is due to large areas of impervious surfaces. And the other one that I read actually goes kudos, and she's smiling here because she knows where I'm going with this, that there was an article for Meet the Newest VPs of United Way of Roanoke Valley. And so congratulations is in order. United Way of Roanoke Valley has added 3 vibrant females to its staff, one being Kiana Price Marshall as Vice President of Marketing and Communication, Alicia Childress as the Vice President of Resource Development, and Cheryl Mosley as Vice President of Community Impact. The newest members of the senior leadership team, and this is what really impressed me, was that they are all natives of Roanoke and proud graduates of Roanoke City Public Schools. And then lastly is my public service announcement, which Bob mentioned, that was also in the Roanoke Tribune, which was for the Eureka Park development. And as Bob mentioned, there will be a community engagement meeting for the redevelopment of Eureka Recreation Center. And I just wanted to stress that for the public, for those in the Northwest neighborhood to be able to know that there is an engagement meeting, so they can't say they didn't know, that is being held tomorrow. December the 6th at the Melrose Branch Library Community Room from 6 to 7:30 p.m. And that the architectural team will also be available to share those designs and the concepts and potential amenities for the new facility. And the residents are encouraged to provide input and feedback as part of the process. And that's all I had.
Just to be clear, this will not be the only opportunity. It's
right,
the first
but this
opportunity.
is the first
Yeah.
for them to be able to come out. So I wanted to give them first dibs on being able to have input. Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Bob, let me ask you if you would have somebody from Public Works to go and look at the Martin Luther King statue. I got a call from Penella Chubb Wilson that's been defaced a lot, some paint's been thrown around it, and so I think we need to take a look at that and just see what the status of what's going on with it.
I went by there last night, and earlier in the week, there was some kind of a orange, traffic vest that was hanging up there, and it's been removed. So I'm not sure, but it'd be good to double check.
Yeah, we'll definitely.
Okay.
The only thing I saw was the vest. there something else going on?
Well, she said something throwing white paint or something around. That's what she mentioned.
Maybe she meant the orange fence.
Oh, it gotta be, you can't say orange and white, it's gotta be different. There's something there. But anyway, I just check that out, see what's going on with it. All right, no more comments from council. Item number 2 is vacancies on certain authorities, boards, commissions, and committees appointed by council. I'll take this in the order that it's laid out. Well, all right, but I'm going in the order that we have, which you have that last, but we're gonna do that.
Do we need to come out of closed meeting?
Yeah, let me go through an order that is written.
I'm confused about
If you need to do that, then I need to
It
change,
needs to be changed, Mayor.
but I've been doing it for a while.
And each time we end up saying it needs to be changed. It needs to be changed.
Well, Madam Clerk, do you have,
Come out of closed meeting first.
pardon me?
You can come out of closed meeting.
All right, I'm saying that, but when you list it on my material, we've been doing it for the last several weeks. Last several months that we've had these. This comes up first, appointments and reappointments.
Yeah.
And so right now, we're not doing it. I'm going that, then we'll come back to that, man, if we do it. That was the way we did it.
Yes,
in the
we'll
past.
change it on the agenda
Then I'll
from
go ahead.
going forward.
Okay, yeah, well, go ahead, but I just wanted to get this straight because
Thank you.
it keeps going the same
I
way.
understand. I move with respect to any closed meetings just concluded that each member of city council in attendance certify to the best of his or her knowledge, excuse me, that 1, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meetings requirements under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and 2, only such public business matters as were identified in any motion by which any closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered by members of council in attendance.
Second motion.
All right, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor White Boyd.
Aye.
Mr. Cobb.
Aye.
Ms. Moon Reynolds.
Aye.
Ms. Price.
Abstain.
Sanchez Jones.
Aye.
And Mayor Lee.
Aye. And what came out of, that was closed session, and we'll now go to appointments and reappointments. And I'll ask Councilmember Cobb to share with us the names that were placed in nomination.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are appointing reappointing Jason Varney for a new 3-year term starting January 1st, 2023 to the Board of Zoning Appeals. We're affirming and appointing Tiffany Keffer, the new Chief Magistrate, to replace Stephen Poff on the Court Community Corrections Program Regional Community Justice Board. And we are appointing Manuel Dotson to fill the unexpired term of office for Peter Volleson ending March 31st, 2025 for the Fair Housing Board.
All right, thank you. When the roll is called, if we agree, please let it be known by the saying of all nominees. When the roll is called, and I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll on those names.
Vice Mayor White Boyd.
All nominees.
Mr. Cobb.
All nominees.
Ms. Moon Reynolds.
All nominees.
Ms. Sanchez Jones.
All nominees.
And Mayor Lee.
All nominees. All right, if there is no further business to come before council, this meeting is adjourned.